Arid Epiphany by Lewis Lucraft. Chapter 1. Visions of Twin Suns. I jolted upright, a marionette cut from its strings, ensnared in a maze of shadows and scattered papers. The flickering light of the bedside lamp cast my surroundings into sharp relief, a claustrophobic cavern littered with the ghosts of half-formed ideas and forgotten dreams. My heart thundered in my chest, urgency spiraling through my veins as the remnants of the dream flitted just out of reach like whispering phantoms. The walls closed in on me, their dark hues a reminder of the clutter that choked my narrow sanctuary. Every corner held relics of my obsession, maps, ancient texts, and artifacts that spoke of a history I sought to unravel. Yet tonight, it was the dual glowing orbs that burned themselves into my mind, and towering spires that reached for a sky unseen, all wrapped in the velvet of an infinite night. They flickered behind my closed eyelids, teasing, evoking emotions I could barely comprehend. My hands trembled as they grasped the well-worn leather journal from the nightstand, its spine creaking as if protesting the urgency of my need. The pen hovered above the empty page, a tool for my frantic thoughts, a vessel for the visions that danced tantalizingly close yet eluded my grasp. Each stroke carved the dual orbs, their luminescence a haunting echo of some forsaken place. As I sketched, a part of me recoiled. Was I documenting revelation or drawing from the depths of madness? The symbols surged forth, spilling from the edges of my consciousness into the realm of the tangible. I fought to anchor the ephemeral into permanence, my breath coming in sharp, erratic bursts. The ticking of the pocket watch on my cluttered bedside table pulsed through the air, a rhythmic heartbeat underscoring the chaos of my thoughts. Time felt irrelevant, as if I existed in a pocket of dread, every tick a reminder of the burden I bore. I paused, staring at the burgeoning image before me, ink smudging under the pressure of my feverish hand. Would this drawing be my salvation, or a herald of doom? Past sins clawed at the edges of my mind, mysteries long buried in the shadows of my pursuits, voices that echoed warnings through a hall of mirrors. I had lived too long in the depths of the past, clinging to fragments of knowledge that threatened to consume me whole. Drawing a shaky breath, I returned to my task, the glow of the orbs fueling my relentless drive. With each scratch of the pen, I felt a kinship with the darkness lurking just beyond the fringes of my understanding, whispering secrets I was never meant to uncover. My journal became a battleground, not merely for ink, but for the essence of a truth that lay hidden beneath layers of time and consequence. As dawn crept slowly beyond the horizon, I marveled at the creation I had birthed, shadows intertwined with symbols, a harbinger of discovery that felt like an invitation to despair. The vision was nearly complete, and with it, the gnawing realization washed over me. There was something inherently dangerous in these drawings, an allure I could neither resist nor fully comprehend. My thoughts spiraled, intertwining with the symbols, their meaning as elusive as the fading echoes of the night. The world outside continued its relentless turn, while I remained ensnared in this cavern of my own design, consumed by the weight of possibilities that pulsed with ominous potential. I was drawn into the depths of the unknown, where fascination and dread melded into a single entity, and the horizon began to blur into a dark, creeping fog that awaited my next move. The air in the office thickened with dust and the weight of unspoken truths as I paced beside my heavy mahogany desk. The walls seemed to lean in, crowded with artifacts and books that whispered secrets of ages long past. I felt like a trapped bird fluttering against the confines of a cage, desperate for an escape that lay just beyond the cluttered boundaries of reason. Shadows wavered in the soft fluorescent light, a flicker of uncertainty dancing in the corners where the books stacked high gave the illusion of sentinels watching over my frantic search. "Liam?" my colleague ventured, voice low and cautious as I moved back and forth, the rhythm of my pace mirroring the cadence of my racing thoughts. "You seem consumed by this." I stopped, casting a fleeting glance at him. A quiet man with keen eyes, the kind that lingered on details often overlooked. He sat there, hands clasped atop the desk as if holding the weight of our conversation. An array of artifacts cluttered the surfaces, reminders of civilizations long gone. Yet here I was, grappling with something that felt all too immediate, too alive. I keep dreaming of this place, these symbols. I flipped open my journal with a snap, the pages crackling under the pressure. My hand brushed across the intricate sketches, those two orbs glowing against the backdrop of impossibly tall spires. Do you see them? His gaze dropped to the pages, the concern etched into the lines of his face deepening. Liam, what you've sketched, it's unsettling. Unsettling? The word hung heavy between us, sparking an electric charge. This could be monumental. A breakthrough. A nervous tapping on the desk accompanied my fervor, my colleague leaning forward as if the proximity could somehow bridge the chasm of disbelief. But at what cost? You've been losing sleep over these dreams. Sleep. I let out a sharp breath, the edge of my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. This is bigger than sleep. It's a call, a summons from something far beyond what we understand. The ambient hum of the fluorescent light intermingled with our voices, punctuating the silence that followed. The quiet power of the artifacts that surrounded us served as a witness to my conviction, a gallery of the past echoing their untold stories. I could feel their weight pressing down on my shoulders, the sense that something was lurking in the shadows, an urgency threatening to spill into the world. Look, I insisted, desperation fueling my words as I gestured toward the sketches. This could redefine everything. We can unlock ancient wisdom, or at least the promise of it. He leaned back, brow furrowed in thought, an uncharacteristic hesitation playing on his features. But what if this wisdom comes with a price? These symbols, are they a key or a curse? His voice trembled slightly, underscoring the weight of his inquiry. The office felt smaller, as if the space itself were reacting to the weight of our conversation. I opened my mouth to respond, but paused, uncertainty creeping in, a tight knot forming in my chest. Past sins nagged at my consciousness, each vision of those glowing orbs reminding me of my own hubris, a reminder that in the pursuit of knowledge one could invite ruin. Perhaps. I faltered, my thoughts straying from passion to trepidation. Maybe there is danger in what I pursue. The realization hung thickly in the air, a thread connecting our mutual apprehensions. My colleague watched me intently, the quiet scrutiny almost a balm for my racing heart. Just promise you'll consider that, he implored, voice earnest yet laced with concern. The silence stretched as I met his gaze, both of us standing on the precipice of something profound and potentially catastrophic. The shadows of the room seemed to pulse with life, echoing the ominous potential lying dormant in my findings. Perhaps I had drawn back the veil too far, and now stood teetering at the edge of a dark unknown. The conversation, so laden with gravity, drew to a close, but the unease settled deep within me like an unwelcome guest. I found myself grasping for the dual orbs once more, eager to unravel their secrets, yet a shadow of doubt clung to me, a realization that with each revelation, I might just be signing my own silent pact with the dark forces of the past. Chapter 2: The Forgotten Library. The library loomed like a forgotten fortress, its crumbling facade barely illuminated by the scant light filtering through grime-laden windows. I pushed aside a drape of cobwebs, each strand a testament to neglect, as I stepped into the gloom. The air was thick with age. Dust and decay mingled to form a sacrosanct shroud, binding me to secrets too powerful to disclose, too terrible to comprehend. I hesitated, absorbing the silence that filled the space like a dark fog. Each creak of the floorboards echoed my apprehension, as if the very structure were groaning under the weight of what had transpired within its walls. I moved further inside, the hum of my footsteps in this repository of the ancient and arcane filling the void, punctuating my lonely exploration. Between the narrow aisles lined with crumbling shelves, I navigated my way forward, brushing layers of dust from the spines of tomes that had surrendered to time. Each title bore a unique calligraphy, curling and fading, whispering promises of forgotten knowledge and cautionary tales. They beckoned me closer with silent entreaties, seductive in their erudition, yet oppressive in their mystery. I could almost feel their weary gaze upon me, the weight of 1,000 lost souls pushing against my resolve. In that space, I felt both the thrill of discovery and the haunting recognition of being a trespasser in a realm not meant for my kind. Still, my fingers brushed the surfaces of these volumes, recalling the distinct sharpness of ink and paper, elements that made up the bridge between worlds. In the quiet, I found a rhythm, an unhurried inspection where the slow unfolding of details deepened my obsession. Each corner I turned revealed something else: dilapidated records, tattered manuscripts, fragments of a time where the line between knowledge and madness blurred precariously. I took in their forms as I marked notes with a worn pencil on scraps of paper, my annotations intertwining with a growing sense of dread and anticipation. At last, I reached a secluded corner, the light struggling to penetrate layers of dust on the grimy window. Shadows danced in the beams, flickering across the spines of antiquated books, casting elongated silhouettes that danced and twisted as if whispering long-forgotten truths. It was here that I found a modest wooden table, cluttered with cataloging tools, faded rulers, fragile notebooks, and ink pots, the artifacts of those who had traversed these thresholds before me. As I approached, my fingers moved deliberately across each object, brushing against the fragments of lives once intertwined with the very knowledge I sought. Each artifact was an echo, a remnant of someone who had dared to confront the vast unknown, only to be consumed by it. The palpable sense of past sins haunted this space, tugging at my mind and infusing my heart with trepidation. What had they discovered, and at what cost? I steeled my resolve, determined to forge my path. Here, amidst the ghosts of unturned pages and unread tomes, lay answers I would extract even at the expense of my sanity. As I leafed through the delicate pages of the tome, the very act felt like walking a tightrope, balancing the thrill of discovery against the fear of unraveling what had been sealed within for centuries. The brittle edges cracked like whispering secrets under my touch, each turn evoking memories of those restless nights where dreams entwined with shadows, beckoning me closer to madness. The book felt frail in my hands, its yellowed pages brimming with the weight of ancient wisdom. I proceeded with the utmost caution, aware that one careless move might ruin the legacy held within. My breath slowed as the scent of aging paper enveloped me, a musty yet alluring fragrance reminiscent of decay and hidden knowledge. It stirred something deep within, a yearning to know the untold. As I carefully turned another page, the volume released a sigh that echoed my own anticipation. Suddenly, I felt a slight dislodging, a resistance against the parchment caught between fragile sheets. My heart raced, quickening, as a folded slip tumbled forth, landing softly upon the table's weathered surface. The noise of its landing broke the silence, ringing like an ominous bell. With cautious reverence, I retrieved the parchment, its edges crisp and crumbling with age, and brought it closer under the library's hesitant light. Intricate symbols danced across the surface, curving and twisting in ways that stirred a deep, primal fear within me. My fingertips traced the lines, following the maze that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. It was a map, a faded route etched upon the very fabric of the parchment, marking pathways unseen. I unfolded the brittle paper carefully, its rustling sound filling the quiet room. My breath hitched at the possibility of what it might reveal, what secrets had lain dormant for years, only to awaken now beneath my hand. As I laid it flat upon the cluttered table, The symbols began to resonate within me, whispering hints of knowledge that felt intimately familiar, entwining with the visions that had plagued my nights. Turning back to the tome, I combed through the pages again, now with a more heightened sense of purpose. Each flick of the pages was imbued with a desperate need for connection, searching for markings that might correspond with the cryptic drawing before me. The map seemed to pulse with an urgency, reflecting shadows of my dreams, and I felt a dark thrill welling inside, as if the fates were entwining my path with these very signs. Each photograph I had taken, every entry in my journal, began to blur with the mysteries that surrounded the now glorious parchment. I knew I had stumbled onto something profound, perhaps monumental. The library thrummed around me with 1,000 breaths, each whispered in solemn anticipation. I paused, the symbols lying before me feeling both like a revelation and a curse. As the light began to wane, casting elongated shadows across the room, I realized I was no longer just an observer but a participant in this dark dance, a mind poised on the precipice of revelations too terrifying to confront. With a gentle flick, I retrieved my small digital camera from my pack, a modern instrument designed to capture moments and preserve truths. But as I set it down beside the parchment, the chasm between my academic resolve and the haunting knowledge of what lay before me grew wider, reflecting the grotesque interplay of my obsession. Carefully, I adjusted the camera, positioning it with precision, angling the lens to capture every intricate inscription, every fine line that constituted the ancient root. My heart quickened at the prospect of translating these markings into knowledge, yet beneath the surface stirred a tempest of dread tinged with familiarity. It was an intricate dance, a blend of academic rigor with the dark seduction of secrets too potent to contain. As I focused, my fingers trembled slightly, betraying the weight of anticipation. I tapped the camera screen, reviewing the image captured. The parchment glimmered beneath the soft light, as if alive, the symbols seeming to reach out and beckon me to delve deeper, to connect them to the whispers of my dreams. I flipped through my journal, searching for the pages where I had meticulously noted my night visions, the patterns that haunted my slumber. There lay an overlapping tide between the contents of my dreams and this very map, their echoes intertwined like strands of fate, painting a picture I had yet to fully comprehend. Each photograph seemed to feed my longing to unearth the truths cloaked within shadows, to understand the significance of what I had found. The room hummed with a pulsing energy, vibrating through the air as I leaned closer to the camera, intent on ensuring that every detail was documented with the utmost clarity. Each click of the shutter became a mantra of sorts, a rhythmic incantation that held the promise of revelation. As I oscillated between the captured images and the parchment, it became evident that I was entrapped, no longer a mere observer but rather a fervent participant in a dangerous game. My breath caught in my throat as the symbols shimmered like distant stars, each one a door waiting to be opened, each one carrying echoes of warnings unheeded. The delicate balance between discovery and madness hung precariously in the air, and as I set the camera aside, it was as though I had wrenched open a portal leading into the depths of the unknown. The parchment, now a physical key to the mysteries haunting my dreams, lay prominent on the table, a silent witness to the battles within. What had begun as a scholarly pursuit had morphed into something far more sinister, a drawing forth of ancient echoes that called to me in the night. The fading light cast sinister shadows upon the artifacts around me, and I felt a shiver crawl up my spine, an intuitive warning thrumming within the marrow of my bones. I stared at the parchment, the symbols etched upon it heavy with portent, and realized with chilling clarity that this knowledge might cost me everything. The promise of discovery stirred a dark desire in me, yet my conscience whispered warnings like distant echoes growing ever louder. What path had I chosen, and at what terrible cost? Chapter 3: Assembling the Team. The cafe hummed with muffled conversations, and the aroma of aged books mixed with coffee, an intoxicating blend of nostalgia and lingering dread. As I strode past crooked shelves filled with dusty tomes, my worn journal at my side, I searched for her, the enigmatic figure whose keen intellect was as unsettling as it was magnetic. There, nestled among the clutter of loose papers and forgotten stories, was Ava, her blue eyes piercing through the haze of worn parchment, ready to unravel the mysteries that threatened to consume us both. I stepped into the muted warmth of the room, the late afternoon sun casting thin rays through the curtained windows. As I approached, my heart quickened, driven by both anticipation and the weight of questions unspoken. Ava set aside her tattered notebook, an intimate offering, and acknowledged me with a measured nod. Her movements were precise, an expression of that meticulous nature I had come to admire, perhaps even envy. Taking my seat across from her, I unfolded the sketches with a reverent delicacy, revealing twin suns locked in an eternal embrace, spires climbing into unknown heights. I placed the pages before her, and her gaze deepened, narrowing as if searching for the secrets etched within the lines. "I've seen these symbols before," she remarked, her voice tinged with cautious intrigue. The rustle of paper punctuated her statement, each sound underscoring the gravity of our discourse. As she flipped through a language guide, a collection of whispers from civilizations long past, my own heart seemed to echo in the space between us. I leaned in, caught in the magnetic pull of her focus, which was now entirely devoted to the illustrations sprawled before us. "They trace back to a culture that feared the convergence of those celestial bodies," I replied, excitement threading through my tone. The implications were vast, spiraling into realms where dreams met reality, a chaotic mix I both craved and dreaded. A waitress passed, her arms laden with mismatched china cups that jostled gently with each step, the clattering a bittersweet reminder of the establishment's faded vibrance. Our gazes flickered momentarily toward her, a shared acknowledgement of the world beyond our cloistered discussion. But quickly, our focus returned to the table cluttered with the remnants of civilization, our precious relics and the voices of ancient scholars now silent. "So, the dreamers believed this alignment could open a doorway," Ava mused, her eyes still fixed on the sketches, and I could sense the gravity of her words. She held them close, as though acknowledging the frailty of human understanding. "What would we do if such a portal existed?" The question lingered, heavy with unfulfilled implications. I felt the weight of history pressing upon me, my breath catching as I met her gaze. There was something unyielding in her intensity, a fiery light amid the encroaching shadows. "We would cross it," I said, a spark igniting within me. I could see it in her eyes, the thrill that danced beneath the surface, the unquenchable thirst for knowledge that could lead us into the unknown. For a brief moment, time stretched, as if the air itself vibrated with potential, and I imagined us standing before that mythical threshold side by side. But the moment slipped, eroded by a silence that felt laden with our respective demons. The clinking of cups and soft murmurs around us served as the backdrop to our gathering unease. It was a reminder that not all the shadows belonged to ancient history. Some loomed in our pasts, beckoning us toward inevitable reckonings. Ava's fingers brushed the edges of the language guide, and I saw the tiniest flicker of doubt cross her features, a vulnerability carefully masked beneath her resolute demeanor. "Dreams cannot be mapped," she uttered, half a thought, half a challenge. It hung there, alive, like the dust motes catching the dying light. I felt my heart beat faster. The clash of ideas was brewing beneath our polite discourse. What did she truly believe? Did she share my obsession, or was her intellectual distance a veil hiding something darker? Just then, the cafe door swung open, letting in a gust of cool air, scattering a few loose papers off our table, and sending a shiver through the ambient warmth. As I reached to gather them, I caught a glimpse of the rugged figure entering, dust clinging to his jacket, a herald of impending interruption. Just as Ava's brow furrowed in contemplation, the cafe door creaked open, a gust of cool air stirring the ghosts of conversation. A figure stepped inside, rugged and resolute, his presence an undeniable disruption in our carefully cultivated discourse. Noah West, a man shaped by harsh terrains and unyielding instincts, captured the attention of both Ava and me, leaving an electric pulse in the air as his eyes locked onto our table. He strode deliberately across the worn wooden floor, boots thudding in rhythmic contrast to the soft murmurs of the other patrons. Dust clung to his jacket, remnants of a world outside that felt miles apart from the cafe's subdued aura. As he approached, his posture emanated an undeniable confidence, honed by years of navigating the wild. There was a strength to him that resonated beneath the weight of old histories. "Is this where the real work happens?" he asked, his voice steady as he glanced at the scattered sketches and books, assessing the intellectual chaos before him. He didn't wait for a response before placing a survival kit bag on the chair beside him, a deliberate thump that demanded acknowledgement. I could feel the air shift, our previous focus fracturing under the weight of his arrival. "Not everything can be measured in practicality, you know," Ava replied, a slight edge to her tone, as if her meticulous nature bristled at his intrusion. She shifted slightly in her seat, the tension curling around us like thick smoke. Noah met her gaze, a quiet skepticism shimmering in his eyes. "This map of yours is unlike anything I've seen," he said, his voice firm yet curious, his assessment devoid of any showy enthusiasm. His eyes drifted over my drawings, considering their complexity, as if gauging their worth against the stark realities he was accustomed to. It was a rare moment of vulnerability, a silent question forming, laden with unasked implications. Ava leaned forward, her posture tightening. "These symbols reflect deeper understandings," she said, her voice lowering. "We're merely tapping into layers of meaning that were perhaps always meant to stay buried." I sensed an invisible current between them, a tension born from diverging perceptions of what lay before us, the intrigue of history's shadows versus the undeniable pull of tangible evidence. As they exchanged their thoughts, I felt an anxious excitement churn within me, a longing for their contrasting worlds to merge. The waitress wove her way through the tables, balancing a tray of mismatched cups that chimed softly in harmony with the low hum of conversation. We exchanged fleeting glances, each of us engrossed in the subtle battle of wills taking place between theory and reality. "The stories of dreamers can often mislead," Noah said, a cautious firmness in his voice. I leaned back, measuring my next words, mindful of the precarious balance we were trying to maintain in the face of his grounded pragmatism. Yet Ava did not falter. Her blue eyes sparked with an intensity that had the power to ignite the most dormant of flames. "But perhaps those dreams are something to be explored rather than dismissed," she countered, a flicker of challenge lacing her tone. It was evident that Noah had more experience navigating treacherous terrain than he did exploring the labyrinth of minds and stories. Still, his directness could fracture the ethereal webs we spun when talking of ancient truths. I sensed the brewing clash between rationality and speculation, feeling both energized and apprehensive in its presence. "I can assure you," Noah replied, his expression unwavering, "that unless we have tangible proof, we might as well be discussing ghost stories." His practicality stirred within me a mixture of frustration and understanding. I had often danced along the line between obsession and skepticism. What he deemed as prudent, I occasionally embraced as possibility. Ava remained unperturbed, but the furrow of her brow revealed the subtle cracks forming beneath her unwavering facade. Without exploration, proof remains unfound. How many uncharted territories lie undiscovered simply because someone deemed them improbable. She turned her penetrating gaze towards me, inviting my own thoughts into the fray, her underlying message striking an unspoken chord. "Perhaps we should delve into those ghost stories," I suggested tentatively, my heart racing. "There may be more to their truths than meets the eye." But just as I spoke, I caught a glimpse of No's expression. His wariness was palpable, a silent acknowledgement that even in the pursuit of knowledge, danger loomed like the shadows dancing across the cafe walls. It became clear in that moment, beneath the playful banter of conversation and the somber backdrop of old stories whispering their secrets, we were at the precipice of something momentous. Each of us carried shadows from our pasts. It was only a matter of time before they converged, forcing a reckoning between belief and skepticism, dreams and reality. The air crackled with potential, alive with the promise of discoveries unmade. But just as the moment held, the familiar creak of the cafe door interrupted the delicate tension, drawing all eyes towards the threshold. As we grappled with the unknown, the cafe door creaked open once more, heralding a change in the air that was tangible, heavy, and almost oppressive. He stepped inside with the measured grace of someone accustomed to wielding authority. Professor Jake Hastings, a formidable figure who seemed to draw the attention of the entire room, his presence both commanding and chilling. Adjusting his tailored coat, he surveyed our trio, an arctic gaze that pierced through our unguarded discussions. I could feel the tension shift as he settled at the edge of our table, setting down his well-worn leather briefcase with a soft thud that resonated in the quiet moment. Each subtle movement was deliberate. Every aspect of his posture reeked of intellectual superiority, a challenge to everything we had been exchanging. "I fail to see the credibility in dreams being mapped," he stated sharply, his words cutting through the lingering echoes of previous conversations, the clink of his watch ringing like a warning bell. It was a dismissal, palpable in the way he positioned a fountain pen beside my sketches, a silent critique that sought to unravel the very fabric of our discoveries. I felt a surge of indignation. It stirred beneath my skin, the awareness of an impending intellectual clash that felt inevitable. "No," I replied, my voice rising above the quiet tension. "The possibilities are all around us, woven into the very essence of history." The conviction in my words startled even myself. We have to explore every avenue, regardless of how improbable it may seem. Perhaps there lies the key to understanding what was, what remains to haunt us. Ava's fingers tightened around her notebook, her unwavering spirit now kindling alongside my own. "Without dreams, the narratives of history are incomplete," she interjected, eyes flashing with intensity. "Language can carry meaning beyond the tangible. It breathes life into stories that the evidence alone cannot convey." Each word carried weight, drawing us all into a philosophical debate that loomed larger than any sketches or translations. "And what of the rational world?" Professor Jake countered, the sharpness of his tone leaving no room for ambiguity. "Historically speaking, we must anchor our studies in empirical evidence. The whimsical musings of dreams led only to false conclusions." His skepticism echoed through the cafe, competing with the low murmurs that punctuated the space. "Yet the most fascinating discoveries often arise from whispers, from fragments we refuse to ignore," I replied, my passion igniting further with every exchanged word. "To cast aside our intuition is to stifle what makes us human, to distance ourselves from those ancient voices that yearn for expression." Noah, leaning back, remained observant, silently gauging the unfolding tensions, his practicality brewing beneath the surface. "What do you propose, Professor? That we should turn our backs on potential truths, because they feel too mythical?" The words hung in the air, charged with skepticism, urging Jake's responses to become more confrontational. Professor Jake's expression flickered, A moment of visible annoyance, perhaps, but he collected himself, allowing silence to weigh heavy before continuing. Our role is not to become storytellers swayed by fantasy. Our purpose is to illuminate the shadows with logic and reason. The cafe around us pulsed with the energy of our debate, the subtle scraping of chairs and the shifting murmurs of patrons emphasizing the growing chaos around our table. The remnants of old dreams collided with stark realities, weaving an intricate tapestry of intellectual defiance. The conflict charged the atmosphere. It thrummed beneath the mundane sounds of everyday life, each heartbeat drawing us deeper into our own convictions. You speak of illuminating the shadows, yet are you not afraid that the brightest light can blind? Ava pressed, her voice unwavering yet laced with a challenge, a hint of vulnerability breaking through her scholarly shell. What if we're standing on the edge of something profound, unable to see it through the lens of skepticism? Jake's eyes narrowed, irritation giving way to incredulity, the weight of his disbelief palpable as he responded. Mysticism and empirical evidence cannot coexist in serious discourse, he declared, a chill radiating from him as he returned to surveying the sketches before him. I shifted forward in my seat, passion surging like a tide, desperate to bridge the gap. And yet, here we are, I insisted, caught between the possibility of dreams that illuminate dark corners of our understanding and the undeniable pull of scientific rigor. Is it not our duty to chase both paths? To let the confluence of their truths shape the future? Silence stretched between us, a taut string vibrating with the weight of our divergent beliefs, reverberating in the quiet cafe around us. The low murmurs of conversations fell away, leaving only the specter of unresolved tension lingering like the fading scent of fresh coffee. With every word, every breath, we stood on the precipice of our shared destinies, a confluence of knowledge and exploration where the lines between history and the human psyche blurred. And I realized then that regardless of what we sought, our respective paths cast long shadows over the path ahead. No's hand slipped through his hair, his face shifting between contemplation and skepticism. In that quiet moment, amidst the unfolding chaos of intellect and instinct, I felt the air grow thick with promise. The haunting potential of uncharted territories lay before us, both tangible and shrouded in mystery. Chapter 4. The Journey Begins. The cabin of the plane was stifling, the air heavy with the scent of oil and dust. As I stepped inside, the worn aluminum walls loomed close, and I was met with the sight of my companions, each a fragment of the uncertainty we were about to face. Ava nestled in a corner, her fingers tracing the spine of her fragile texts as if they were talismans. Nearby, Noah methodically unpacked his tools with a precision that betrayed the chaos around us. And there, slumped like a deflated balloon, Professor Jake exuded disdain, setting the tone for what felt like a doomed venture. I slipped into the seat across from Ava, who clutched her yellowed texts against her chest, whispering phrases in a dead language that unfurled like smoke, laced with a haunting cadence. Each intonation drew attention. The murmurs of nearby passengers momentarily halted, the tension thick as we strained to hear. Her striking blue eyes flicked up to meet mine, an intensity in her gaze that seemed to dance with both obsession and purpose, igniting the air between us. Meanwhile, Noah sat across from me, a picture of stoicism. He unzipped his weathered duffel bag with measured movements, extracting a compact survival kit. He tapped each tool, the sound a steady pulse in the gathering tumult, grounding me as he methodically checked off the necessary items. The sharp, metallic clinks punctuated the air like an ominous reminder of the wilderness awaiting us beyond the metal frame of the aircraft. Jake, ever the academic skeptic, slumped into the seat beside me with a dismissive huff, his expression carved from stone. Historically speaking, this expedition is ill-founded, he muttered, his arms crossed tightly across his chest, effectively isolating himself from any hope of camaraderie. His presence felt like a fog, darkening our purpose, blurring the lines between curiosity and folly. As the plane's engine hummed to life, I leafed through my worn leather journal, the pages crinkled and faded from time. I felt the weight of my thoughts pressing against the confines of my mind, a dream rattling within. Leaning forward, I could not contain it any longer, the urgency clawing at me. I saw Ithara bathed in twin suns with spires shimmering in a cascade of light, I proclaimed, letting my voice thread through the air. I sensed the tremor of my own certainty reverberate among the group, casting a fragile veil over our gathering trepidation. Ava's focus sharpened, her lips forming an enigmatic smile. Perhaps she understood the depths of what I claimed, the seductive pull of ancient truths calling to us from the pages of her texts. But Noah only shifted, his eyes narrowing slightly, ever the pragmatic realist. I caught his skepticism mirrored in Jake's frown, an arch of brow indicating that they deemed my dreams mere folly, though I knew better. There we sat, the weight of unspoken words thickening the air, an uninvited heaviness descending upon our company. The plane shuddered, rattling in readiness to claim us for the journey ahead, a vessel carrying an eclectic assembly of intellect, obsession, and practicality, each soaked in our hidden sins and silent fears. The feeling of dread clung to us like the dust in the air, an omen of the chaos awaiting beyond the horizon. The aircraft finally began to taxi down the runway, lurching as we took flight. The roar of the engines swallowed my thoughts, pushing me into the familiarity of my journal once more. A shiver ran through me as I attempted to pen my thoughts, a blend of hope and the chilling recognition of what lay ahead. Would Ithara materialize as it had in my dreams, or was I unwittingly beckoning forth a madness born from the past? As I gazed out the tiny window, the earth below faded into a patchwork of sand and stone, becoming a mere memory in the face of the open sky. In the distance, I envisioned those twin suns, a surreal beacon drawing me closer to secrets that whispered promises of enlightenment, yet held the risk of darkness within. I knew then that we were embarking, not just on an expedition, but into a riddle sewn from our histories, a fabric woven of intentions both pure and shadowed. The descent was bumpy, the plane shuddering violently against the relentless embrace of the desert winds. As we touched down, the ground beneath us felt less like a runway and more like the edge of an abyss, calling us into the dry, sun-baked landscape beyond. The aircraft came to a halt, and the door creaked open, unveiling the vast expanse of the Arid Expanse outpost, an unforgiving frontier that seemed to await us with bated breath, embodying both promise and peril. I was the first to rise, driven by an instinct deeper than curiosity. As I made my way down the cramped aisle, the heaviness of the air transformed into a gust that rushed up to greet me. A tumult of fine sand swirled around my feet, whispering secrets of the ancient world that lay beyond the horizon. Noah followed closely, the efficiency of his movements contrasting with my impulsiveness, his face resolute against the gale that assailed us. Ava lingered momentarily, her gaze fixed on the scraps of fading metal signage that declared, Arid Expanse Outpost. The sign seemed to embody the desolation surrounding us, yet her blue eyes flickered with something akin to determination, as if she were searching for a map of meaning hidden within its corroded surface. She clutched her texts tighter, shielding them from the intrusive grains that tugged at her skin. "We've arrived at the edge of something monumental," she murmured, her tone mingling awe with a touch of fear. Jake was the last to step off, grumbling under his breath as he clutched his briefcase, a fortress of rationality amidst chaos. "This is absurd," he muttered, voice strained yet dripping with the confidence of one unwilling to embrace the madness of what we sought. I shot him a glance. Cynicism might suit him, but I couldn't afford to share his doubts. In the fleeting shadow of the plane, I sensed the rest of our team merge into an odd line, silently bracing ourselves against the relentless winds. I extended my hand toward the unfathomable wilderness, gesturing toward the expanse. I saw Ithara, a city beneath twin suns etched in every detail, I insisted, urging my fellow travelers to connect with my vision, knowing its depth was laced with both wonder and dread. I could feel the tension coil among us, a taut string threatening to snap under the weight of our disparate beliefs. As we set foot onto the barren soil, the gravel crunched beneath us, each step a proclamation of our determination to delve deeper into secrets best left undiscovered. The sun beat down with relentless ferocity, illuminating jagged rock formations that jutted out like the bones of ancient beasts, casting shadows that played tricks on my imagination. A growing unease unfurled in the pit of my stomach as we wandered closer to the remnants of the outpost. It appeared long abandoned, the fading walls hinting at stories forgotten by time, whispers of lives lived under the harsh sun now lost to the windswept sands. I noted the crumbling structures, half-buried relics of a world that perhaps had glimpsed the knowledge we sought, but had ultimately fallen prey to its darker corners. "Do you sense it?" I asked, glancing at Ava, who seemed lost in reverie, her mind grasping at something only she could see. "There's a pulse here, a heartbeat of the past." Jake rolled his eyes, his skepticism threatening to boil over, but Noah remained quietly observant, scanning our surroundings as if waiting for something to materialize from the dust itself. The tension among us escalated, woven from unspoken fears and contrasting desires to either conquer or escape the weight of our aspirations. It was then that we noticed the figure approaching, the Dusk Nomad elder, a presence so unexpected it held us in place, motionless. They emerged from the shadows of the weathered ruins, a small, wizened figure whose deep-set eyes seemed to carry centuries of wisdom. Adorned in layers of intricate desert garments that whispered of ancient rites, they appeared both fragile and unyielding, an embodiment of the desert's enigma. "Travelers of the sun, you seek Ithara, do you not?" Their voice, though soft, carried authority and wisdom that resonated deep within me, a reminder that we were not just trespassing on this land, but entwined with its legacies. The elder paused before us, a sense of careful consideration flowing from their gaze. I felt as though we had trespassed into a sacred dialogue without understanding its nuances, the desert listening intently. "The sands hold stories, but they demand a price," they warned, their eyes flaring with a spark of recognition that sent chills racing down my spine. Ava stepped forward, her curiosity igniting a fire within her. "What price must we pay?" The question hung in the air, urgent and charged, teetering on the brink of the unknown. The elder smiled faintly, an inscrutable expression. "Knowledge is never free, and it holds a burden that may reveal more than you intend." They turned, beckoning us to follow, leading deeper into the mysterious remnants of the outpost. Each step brought a renewed pulse of dread. The atmosphere thickened with potential, the sun casting an eerie glow over the desolate site, leaving me uncertain if we were to uncover the splendor of Ithara or awaken a long-dormant terror. As we entered the shadows of the outpost, the sandstorm began to howl around us, a bitter omen swirling into our midst as we took our first steps into a reality that threatened to consume everything we believed. Chapter 5: Sandstorm's Fury. The storm howled, a feral creature unleashed upon us, sand slicing against skin and flesh as I fought to keep my footing. Noah led the charge, each step a testament to his steadfastness, while Ava clung to her parchment like a lifeline, the script barely visible through the lashing grit. With every gust, dread seeped into my bones, whispering of truths best left unexamined. "Keep moving," Noah barked, his voice almost swallowed by the cacophonous winds. I tightened my grip around the strap of my pack, heart racing in sync with the frantic rhythm of our escape. The sun-cracked ground underfoot twisted with gnarled rocks, a treacherous landscape laid bare against the storm. I felt exposed, each breath a battle against the relentless assault of air and sand. Ava struggled to keep her footing beside me, her long dark hair whipping around her face like the tendrils of some storm-born creature. She held the worn parchment close, fingertips tracing its faded symbols, a dance of devotion and desperation. She muttered phrases in a dead language, her voice barely breaking through the roar as she fought to maintain her connection to the past amidst our present chaos. In the fleeting moments between gusts, I glimpsed the intensity in her striking blue eyes, a light both captivating and unsettling, focused entirely on the fragile relic she guarded. "Stay low," Noah commanded, shielding his eyes with a calloused hand as he navigated the jagged terrain ahead. The wind howled in protest, sand and grit biting at exposed skin like a swarm of hornets unleashed. I stumbled forward, nearly losing my footing as supplies rattled in our secured pouches, some items scattering into the choking fury. The storm seemed alive, spiraling around us in chaotic bursts, taunting our hurried footfalls. I could barely hear Noah's call to follow, a deep timbre cutting through the disarray, but I felt its urgency pulse through me, the grounding presence of his leadership a beacon amidst the chaos. "Go," he shouted, urgency laced into his tone. The adrenaline coursed through my veins, pushing me onward, towards the rocky outcropping he flagged in the distance, our refuge from the unrelenting tempest. Ava, resolute despite the chaos, fought to keep her parchment intact. "If we can just find the coordinates," she murmured, a fragile determination threading through her voice, each word an anchor even as the storm threatened to sweep us away. "Just focus on getting to safety." Noah shot back, a rare edge in his voice that underscored the gravity of our situation. I caught Ava's eye, a fleeting moment of shared acknowledgement. Her passion, her obsession, it consumed her in ways I could never fathom, but in this moment it drove her forward, guiding our way through the maelstrom. The ground shifted beneath us, treacherous and uncertain. I felt the energy of the group, a mix of tension and silent resolve, as we pressed on toward the promise of shelter. Our hearts beat in chaotic harmony, propelled by instinct, the howling wind entwined with our frantic thoughts. It was a moment suspended in time, straddling the line between dread and desperation, as the storm became a living entity, a reminder of our vulnerability against forces we could barely comprehend. As we approached the rocky refuge, the spires that broke through the storm's swirling grip loomed larger, majestic yet ominous. I staggered near the storm's edge, fixated on the flicker of luminous shapes piercing through the swirling chaos, the world around us fracturing as dread mingled with fascination. Just as my hand reached out, drawn to the ephemeral light, Professor Jake's grip locked onto my shoulder, yanking me back into the crowd. "No," he barked, eyes sharp and unyielding. "We cannot afford illusions." His voice cut through the wind, firm and decisive, leaving no room for argument. Ava crouched beside the map, adjusting its position under the dim filtered light that barely illuminated our surroundings. "These symbols, they align perfectly," she stated, her voice clipped yet infused with a fierce energy as she committed the map to memory. Damn it, Jake. I couldn't keep quiet any longer. The frustration surged within me, like the tempest around us. "We're losing time." But the words came out muffled, a fragile protest against the whirlwind. Noah methodically checked our dwindling gear, eyes scanning our meager supplies, ever aware of the world outside the storm's rage. The tension spiked between us, with every word amplifying the precarious balance of our desperation. Professor Jake's tone sharpened, his manner imperious, as he snapped the parchment tightly under his arm, sealing away whatever truths he believed it contained. "You're risking too much," he said, his voice hard like flint, cutting off Ava's fervent declarations with practiced ease. The confrontation surged, voices raised against the howling wind and clattering of scattered supplies, urgency clouding reason. As I hesitated on the threshold of the storm and reality, pulled between the allure of what Ava clung to and Jake's sharp dismissal, I felt the weight of each decision, danger and opportunity entwined. Jake's grip tightened as he held me steady, yet the tempest beyond felt an echo of the storms raging within each of us, hardly contained beneath the pressures of our pasts. Time slipped away amidst the sound of grit and fear. The outcropping loomed, our potential salvation just beyond the violent chaos, while the storm around us danced with haunting promises and buried regrets. We stumbled into the rocky refuge, limbs heavy with the storm's weight, breathless in the aftermath of chaos. The howl of the sandstorm became a distant roar, and for a fleeting moment relief washed over me like a cool breeze, yet that comfort was tinged with dread. Darkness pressed in around us, shadows elongating under the fragile, filtered light that barely pierced the shelter's stony embrace. I could hear the wind still raging outside, a haunting reminder of our vulnerability. Noah moved swiftly, his posture tense as he surveyed our temporary sanctuary, muscles coiled like tightly wound springs. I caught a glimpse of him, a silhouette framed against the swirling haze, ever watchful. "Ava," I murmured, forcing my voice above the faint howls. "Are you all right?" My concern echoed, a weight I felt shift within me as I watched her crouch over the map, the parchment practically glowing with promise. "I'm fine," she replied, but her voice held a frenetic energy. The storm outside might have receded, but her fervor surged, an insatiable need that drew me closer like moths to a flame. These symbols, they align perfectly with the coordinates. We might uncover something. Her voice trailed off, lost in her own fervent imaginings, each syllable a thread pulling us into an unraveling tapestry of history. "Align or not, we don't even know if any of it matters," Jake cut in, his tone sharp and dismissive, a steel edge cutting through the excitement. He stood with arms crossed, an immovable figure of doubt amidst the tumult of hope. "It's just an old map. If you choose to chase myths in the storm, don't expect us to follow blindly." Ava's head snapped up, the intensity in her blue eyes igniting like a spark against tinder. "This isn't a myth, Jake. You can't dismiss everything you don't understand." Her voice shook slightly, but the strength behind her words reverberated within the shadows, filling the space with a palpable tension. "Everywhere we go, legends surround those who venture too far into the unknown," he argued back, dismissing her with a wave of his hand, as if she were the specter of superstition itself. "We need empirical evidence, not stories concocted to scare children." "And perhaps your empirical evidence leaves out something vital, Professor." Noah stepped forward, the air thickening around us. I felt the pulse of their standoff, the dark energy crackling with each retort. "You're so consumed by proof, you forget that sometimes the unknown has its own truths." In that instant, the storm outside felt muted. It became a specter of their debate, echoing the internal chaos unraveling among us. My heart thudded in rhythm with the rising conflict, both men fixated on their steadfast beliefs, Ava caught between a yearning for understanding and the weight of disbelief anchoring her. The rocky refuge offered no comfort, only darkened crevices filled with potential echoes of despair. Each figure cast long shadows, merging into one, a ghostly tableau forged in uncertainty. I drew a breath, attempting to break the cycle, the knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. "Can we focus on surviving this storm?" I spoke, attempting to weave a thread of pragmatism into the fabric of their discourse. "Whatever is outside is just as real as what's written on that map, but let's not tear ourselves apart over what might be." Their attention fell on me momentarily, Ava's fierce resolve tempered by a flicker of concern, and Jake's brows knitting into a single incredulous line. But the moment passed, the storm outside serving as a reminder of the real threats lurking beyond our rocky haven. In the shadows, as their argument began to ebb, I took a moment to collect my thoughts, searching for clarity amidst the noise that clung to my mind like shadows. Ava's excitement tangled with the lingering echoes of our fears, the hesitation in No's quiet strength a reminder of burdens he bore. As the wind's howl waned outside, whispers of the past echoed around us, unraveling the knots that bound us to each other, secrets we held tight like pieces of fractured glass, jagged and beautiful. It was in this space, confined yet expansive, that truths began to claw their way to the surface. Outside, the storm raged on, relentless and unforgiving, an audible reminder of the dangers lurking not just in the sands but within each of us. We might find sanctuary here, but I understood, the winds were only a prelude, a harbinger of what was to come, setting the stage for deeper confrontations, haunted and harrowing. We shifted closer, voices quieting as we nestled against the cold stone, the sounds of the tempest a muffled backdrop to our fragile reality. It became an unspoken agreement. The storm might leave us shaken, but the shadows of our past would not be so easily cast aside. And yet, as I looked toward Ava, and then to Noah and Jake, I understood that this was only the beginning. The true storm lay ahead, where faith and reason would clash, where we might find salvation or damnation within the depths of our choices. Chapter 6: Mirages and Madness. The sand stretched endlessly before us, rippling under the relentless sun, an infernal sea of warmth and brightness that swallowed our footprints whole. I held my leather journal tightly, its pages whispering secrets of ancient ruins, but the heat dulled my focus, each step felt heavy with unsaid words. Ava walked slightly ahead, her wide-brimmed hat casting a shadow over her determined features as she scanned the horizon for a shape I dared not define. Around us, the desert breathed, shifting with a kind of sentience that unsettled the very marrow of my bones. Noah was off to my left, each measured step maintaining the pace of our march. His posture was tense, ready to spring into action, the way a wild animal might instinctively react to the approach of danger. Dust billowed from beneath his boots, swirling around his bandana, which he tugged closer against the rising winds. His watchfulness was palpable. I could almost feel it, an electric charge that hummed in the air as we pushed forward through this oppressive wasteland. A sense of camaraderie existed among us, a thin veneer barely skimming the surface of our collective anxiety. Despite that, I found myself gravitating towards the familiar comfort of my journal, a tool of documentation and escape. My fingers traced over sketches that echoed familiar shapes, whispers of the past that danced on the edge of recognition, yet remained cruelly elusive. Professor Jake moved with measured authority behind us, his boots leaving distinct prints as he muttered something about our speed, tapping his pencil impatiently against his well-worn notebook. "Let's keep moving," he commanded, his British accent slicing through the stillness like a knife through thick fog. I could hear the sharp rattle of his pencil against the paper, each rap echoing a condescending reminder of what was expected from the likes of us. Results, evidence, tangible facts that could neatly fit into his structured world of academia. "Distractions won't serve our purpose," he continued, glancing over his wire-rimmed glasses, his brows furrowed in disapproval at the shifting sand and our interrupted pace. As if sensing his scrutiny, I refocused on my sketching, compelled to capture every nuance, every rough line that hinted at the structures we sought. The looming structures remained an elusive mirage, tantalizingly out of reach, teasing us with hints of what lay buried beneath the sands. Ava was focused on something further up ahead, her fingers deftly cleaning a smudge from her notebook, her mind entrenched in its meticulous work even as the wind carried whispers of ages long past. "Stay alert for anything unusual," she shouted back to us, her voice steady, but I could sense an undercurrent of urgency in her tone. Her passion for the ancient languages beckoned from the horizon, where antiquity clung tightly to the grains of sand. And as we moved, a tension thrummed beneath the surface, as palpable as the heat shimmering above the dunes. Noah grunted in response, an acknowledgement that did little to distract him from his role as sentinel against the vast expanse. And for a moment, it felt as if the weight of the desert pressed down upon us, a haunting specter that permeated the very air we breathed. The unsettling notion lingered that we were not alone in this unending stretch of heat and desolation. Ancient eyes seemed to peer out from beneath the sands, judging our intentions and desires. Yet, as each hour unfolded beneath the unforgiving sun, we pressed forward, our motivations weaving into a singular purpose, though at times I wondered whether it was the pursuit of discovery or the ghostly remnants of our pasts that propelled us onward. In that moment, my thoughts drifted back to the dreams that plagued my nights, visions of forgotten places and half-formed whispers of warnings. The idea that ancient secrets might be waiting beneath the desert's sweltering surface filled my chest with a mix of dread and exhilaration. But a voice inside warned me that some stones should remain unturned, some ruins left undisturbed, lest they awaken the things best left slumbering. We trudged onward, a collection of fractured ambitions against the backdrop of a shifting desert, our lives drawn taut between curiosity and the burden of knowing. In this uneasy silence, our past sins loomed over us, whispers of doubt rippling through the sands like echoes of voices long forgotten. And as the sun hung high in the sky, casting our shadows like ephemeral reminders of our mortality, the vastness of the desert felt like a mirror reflecting not just the landscape around us, but the internal turmoil each of us carried within. As we trudged through the relentless expanse, the air thickened, pressing down on us like an unseen weight, suffocating in its stillness. Just when I thought the horizon had given all it could offer, patches of sand began to emerge, etched with symbols that shimmered against the sun, beckoning me with an almost hypnotic allure. I halted, heart racing, as the first ghostly shapes took form, emerging like forgotten memories clawing their way to the surface. "Look!" I exclaimed, breathless, a mix of exhilaration and fear coursing through my veins. I dropped my journal, pages flapping like wounded birds as I dashed closer to inspect the inscriptions, fingers twitching with the urgent need to touch what should not be there. The fine grains of sand felt cool beneath my palm, contrasting with the oppressive heat that enveloped us all. Ava knelt down, her fingers brushing the sand with a reverence that matched her fascination. "These markings, they're not random," she declared, her voice a clear melodic contrast to the desolate soundscape surrounding us. Each carved letter, almost alive under her touch, was not merely an inscription, but a pulse of ancient knowledge desperate to be deciphered. As she traced the curves and angles with meticulous attention, I felt a flutter of envy. She belonged to this realm, understood its language, and yet, as I crouched beside her, I could sense an undercurrent of uncertainty rippling beneath her determination. Noah stood back, glancing between the inscriptions and the shimmering distance. "It's a mirage," he said with a measure of skepticism, though a hint of awe edged his tone as he pointed towards a distant oasis, its lush green pools flickering in and out of existence. I turned to see what had captured his gaze. My breath caught in my throat. There, shimmering like a dream spun from mirth and madness, lay the illusion of verdant life, a haunting specter amidst the barren sands. "A mirage can't manifest what isn't here," I countered, glancing between him and Ava, trying to tether myself to rational thought. But Noah's outstretched arm trembled as he reached for the oasis, desperation etched across his features. The image rippled like water, inviting yet treacherous, the desire to pursue it clashing against the stark reality of our surroundings. With the pen poised above my sketchpad, I captured the moment, intent on locking these fleeting images within its confines. But the farther I leaned into this fixation, the more I felt the ink of the past intertwining with my present. The shifting symbols, once sharply defined, seemed to dissolve beneath my gaze, as if they were woven from the very essence of mirages themselves. Professor Jake, though hesitantly inching closer, scrutinized the symbols with hawkish eyes. "This defies logic," he scoffed, his skepticism intertwining with a begrudging curiosity. The echoes of his voice carried a weight, making the air crackle with tension. He tapped the page of his notes, each sharp rap a reminder of the scientific world he held dear, yet there was a flicker of uncertainty beneath his disdain. Even a man of empirical evidence must confront the inexplicable, if only to dismantle it further. As I absorbed the layers of inscriptions, I sensed the narrative shifting, turning sinister, as the markings seemed to respond to Ava's touch. The symbols squirmed and contorted, as though imbued with a sentience of their own, and a swell of horror bubbled beneath my skin. "Liam, they're changing," she whispered, her brow furrowing, the thrill of discovery intertwining with dread. "The symbols remain even as the sand shifts," she remarked, voice edged with apprehension, revealing a deeper connection to the moment, an understanding I could only aspire to grasp. Each frantic scrape of her hand sent ghostly traces of knowledge trickling away, as if we were caught in an elaborate dance of fading truths. Suddenly, my sketchpad fell to the ground, ink scattering across the page, thoughts escaping my grasp like grains of sand slipping through fingers. Panic surged within me, and I scrambled to retrieve it, but the heat of the desert floor bit at my skin, forcing me to concentrate on the present even as the past clawed for my attention. "Stay focused," Professor Jake barked, voice tightening with irritation, as he stepped back from a particularly warped outline on the horizon that blurred like ink bleeding across paper. The desert became alive with a cacophony of impossible wonders. The mirage flickered closer, an alluring promise wrapped in treachery, and yet there I stood, rooted by uncertainty. In that moment, the interplay between reality and illusion blurred, tension crackling among us, pooling in the space between fear and fascination. What awaited us, I wondered, beneath the soft sandy veil? The answer remained tantalizingly close, yet fiercely out of reach, whispering secrets I was not sure I wanted to unveil. The desert shifted with us, a willing participant in our unfolding drama, as we stood at the precipice of a revelation that would unravel everything we thought we knew. The ground seemed to pulse beneath us, each vibration resonating through my very being as I struggled to grasp the fading inscriptions. The mirage warped further, flickering like the last embers of a dying fire, and an unsettling sense of urgency gripped me, a warning that something terrible was about to unfurl. With the sensations overwhelming my senses, I felt as though I was caught in a delicate web, one that threatened to ensnare us all. The raw beauty of the inscriptions I'd hoped to preserve felt like they were slipping through my fingers, torn away by the very fabric of reality. I clenched my jaw against the rising tide of panic, but there was no denying the surge of doubt creeping into my mind. Was this truly a manifestation of the ancient past, or was it a perilous illusion concocted by the desert's treacherous nature? The heat bore down mercilessly, pressing against my skull as if demanding an answer I could not provide. Noah stepped closer, brow furrowed in confusion, his innate skepticism wavering as he surveyed the warped reality stretching before us. "This is absurd," he murmured, staring intently at the oasis, the brilliant greens now blending with the soft browns of sand, creating an indistinct haze. "It can't be real." But as he spoke, I sensed a flicker of fear reflected in his eyes, a silent acknowledgement of the uncertainty encroaching upon his seasoned pragmatism. "We're witnessing something extraordinary," I interjected, though my voice wavered, betraying my internal conflict. Each heartbeat echoed in my ears, thrumming like a drum, summoning me toward answers even as my instincts screamed for retreat. I shot a glance toward Ava, whose fingers trembled as they hovered above the inscriptions, now shifting in form and intensity, weaving stories I could only barely begin to comprehend. This could be evidence of something deeper," Ava whispered, her face a mask of conflict between her scholarly zeal and the primal fear pooling in her stomach. Her fingertips danced just above the surface, afraid to touch something that might consume her wholly. I stepped closer, sharing the burden of her obsession, and nodded in silent understanding. Each flicker of the markings made my pulse quicken, an exhilarating rush tethered to the dread that permeated the air. A fleeting glance from Jake revealed his skepticism, tempered by a desperate hope that the symbols could indeed hold some answer. "You need to be careful," he warned, voice trembling slightly even as he sought to regain his composure. He kept glancing toward the inscriptions and back at Ava, his tight-lipped certainty cracking beneath the pressure. "Chasing illusions will only lead to ruin," he insisted, his authoritarian tone carrying an uncharacteristic hint of vulnerability. My heart pounded in my chest as the sinking realization began to envelop us, the chaotic blend of desperation and revelation clawing at the edge of our thoughts. I felt the desert closing in, its weight pressing down, as the mirage continued to shimmer and sway, obscuring the boundary between truth and trickery. In that precarious moment, the symbols began to dance, warping and shifting into incomprehensible patterns, alive and foreboding. Shadows flickered like flames caught in the gusts of a vengeful wind, and panic knotted in my stomach. I instinctively grasped for Ava, seeking her as a tether against the surrealness unfolding around us. "Ava, are you seeing this?" She nodded, a spark of understanding igniting behind her eyes, but her expression grew frantic as the letters flickered like distant stars being snuffed out. "Liam, they're disappearing." The anxiety in her voice struck a chord deep within me, resonating with a sensation that threatened to unspool my tightly wound thoughts. The dry winds whipped around us, carrying with them not only dust, but also the whispers of ancient souls that echoed through the air, a cacophony of dreams unfulfilled and knowledge long forgotten. The edges of reality blurred, disorienting in its intensity, and for a moment, time stretched and distorted as we stood on the precipice of something vast and terrifying. "Get a hold of yourselves," Noah shouted, his frustration morphing into a primal urgency. He had retreated further from the inscriptions, rooted by a primal instinct that screamed at him to flee. I wanted to follow, yet I felt compelled to engage, a push and pull as our various motivations collided. As my heart raced, the sand underfoot shifted again, a cruel mockery of our present anguish, mirroring the unsettling cadence of our thoughts. I felt the mirage ripple outwards, cascading illusions distorting the very essence of our reality. It all blended into a grotesque tapestry, vivid and disturbing, as the lines separating truth and illusion evaporated like the evaporating waters of a receding tide. The words became ethereal, melding together as an ensemble of distorted voices that called out to us from deep within the desert's ancient core, carrying fears of the past intertwined with visions of a dark future. "We need to find a way out," I cried, but even my own voice felt distant, enveloped by the sweltering shadows that engulfed us. Each passing second drew us closer to unraveling at the seams. What had once appeared as an academic pursuit had now taken a nightmarish turn, peeling back layers of reality that we had been naive to trust. And with that, the heat intensified, the mirage warped to an unbearable degree, and the relentless sound of the desert echoed through the recesses of our minds, drowning out the truth and beckoning us into the unknown, a siren song sung by the very sands we tread. Chapter 7. The Dusk Nomads. The dust-covered jeep groaned as we came to a halt, its wheels sinking into the unyielding sand beneath. As the door swung open, the stench of sun-baked earth wafted in, a heavy amalgamation of heat, time, and mystery. I stepped out onto the cracked expanse, my senses overwhelmed by the prickling anticipation that coursed through me like electricity. The scattered stones jutted from the ground, irregular and imposing, while the curling desert grasses seemed to whisper long-forgotten tales. Clutching my worn leather journal, I moved with caution across the arid terrain. It felt as though each footfall echoed against the silence, stirring restless spirits lingering in the shadows of time. My heart raced with the pulse of an ancient drum, a haunting cadence that urged me toward the unknown, a dance with fate. The journal was my compass, a vessel for the obsessions that had pulled me into the depths of this forsaken land. Each page bore the weight of dreams, twisted in the dark recesses of my mind, shaped by countless archaeological mysteries I was determined to uncover. Beside me, Ava stood entranced, her long dark hair drawn back but catching the sun, glinting with the promise of secrets hidden in plain sight. She traced her fingers across the meticulously painted symbols adorning the canvas of an ornate tent, the colors vibrant, yet weathered by time, and the details as intricate as the thoughts whirling in her brilliant mind. Her blue eyes widened with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine, a potent mix of passion and obsession lurking beneath the surface, always dangerously close to breaking free. Noah strode forward, his presence a testament to survival against the harshest of elements. With each deliberate step, his booted feet stirred up puffs of sand, an unwelcome reminder of the shifting nature of our surroundings. His keen gaze scanned the perimeter, assessing the small groups of nomads that moved silently among themselves, exchanging quiet words that seemed to blend into the winds. There was something unsettling about the way he studied the scene, a readiness masked behind a vigilant exterior. He wore his pragmatism like armor, a distant wariness sharpening his instincts, as if expecting danger to unfurl like a serpent at any moment. Professor Jake, trailing behind us, approached with an air of deliberate skepticism. His arms folded tightly across his chest, his jaw clenched in disapproval. He scrutinized the intricate details of the nomad's decorations. I could see the disbelief etched across his furrowed brow, the contempt cloaked beneath layers of rigid academia. To him, these tribes were but quaint obstacles, their legends little more than myths to be dissected and dismissed, a textbook case for the empirical gaze he held so dear. At the edge of a raised platform, he appeared, the imposing nomad chief, keeper of the twilight wisdom, his figure a monument against the shifting backdrop of the dunes. His patterned robes billowed gracefully in the desert wind, each movement deliberate, exuding a power that wrapped around us like a cloak. He stood tall, a weathered visage marked by wisdom and experience, his dark eyes gleaming with knowledge that had perhaps danced between dreams and reality. With a nod of authority, he beckoned us forward, and I felt an electric thrill and deep-seated dread grip my heart. We were on the threshold of an encounter that would echo long after we stepped away, the air thick with tension and the unvoiced expectations of what was to come. The courtyard surrounding him pulsed with the quiet hum of life, sand-colored walls rising around us like ancient sentinels, carved stone reliefs holding the weight of a forgotten history that I yearned to decipher. Yet, even as our group approached the chief, an insidious sensation coursed through me, a whisper of danger tucked within the folds of destiny. Each moment felt fragile, as if the very fabric of reality might fray and reveal a darker truth hidden beneath the surface. I was haunted by visions of the past, echoes of lives lost in the shadows of this land, tugging at the corners of my consciousness. The chief's presence dominated the space, eclipsing all else as I took in the surroundings. The air felt heavy, saturated with the anticipation of the unknown. Beneath the blanket of sunlight, shadows danced eerily along the ground, as if hinting at secrets that lurked just beyond the edge of our understanding. And so we stood, a motley collection of minds, desires, and hidden fears before the keeper of the twilight wisdom. What unfurling saga lay waiting to entrap us in its relentless grasp? We found ourselves enveloped in the stillness of the courtyard, the sand-colored walls towering around us like memories locked away in a forgotten vault. The air was thick with the heat of the day, a palpable sense of anticipation humming just beneath the surface, yet it held an unnerving stillness, an unspoken understanding that each of us stood on the precipice of an inevitable revelation. In front of us, the chief loomed like a specter from a tale woven by the ancients, and I could feel the gravity of his words echo in my bones before he had even spoken. The low walls of the courtyard enclosed us like an intimate theater, framing our encounter against a backdrop of intricately carved stone reliefs depicting scenes from a time lost to history. Sunlight flickered through the slats, casting shadows that danced erratically, reminiscent of spirits too timid to reveal themselves fully. My heart quickened as the imposing figure of the Keeper of the Twilight Wisdom raised a hand slowly, the fabric of his robe swirling around him like the very sands he so revered. "The shifting sands mark the path of destiny," he intoned, his voice resonant, punctuated by deliberate gestures that invited our attention. His presence commanded respect, yet there was an underlying thread of something darker lurking just beneath the surface. The words flowed, rich with symbolism, yet tinged with ambiguity that prickled the air between us, amplifying the distance carved by our cultures. Ava clutched her meticulously reproduced parchment with both hands, her fingers trembling slightly, an almost imperceptible betrayal of the excitement that roiled beneath her composed exterior. "The symbols on your tents mirror those of my maps," she replied, her voice steady but laced with an urgency that belied the trembling beneath. Her expertise shone through, illuminating the connection that sparked her interest, a beacon in the churning fog of confusion surrounding us. But in her focus, I noticed the strain of maintaining control, as if grappling not just with the meaning of her findings, but the implications of their significance. Behind them, Noah held his ground, positioned a few paces back with a readiness that was both reassuring and ominous. His eyes narrowed, a steel focus honed on the chief, while his grip tightened on the well-worn knife at his belt. I could sense the undercurrents of tension swirling, with every passing moment beckoning danger closer, a reminder that the lines of respect and trust were drawn thinly here, ready to be crossed. Professor Jake's skepticism snapped through the atmosphere like a whip, breaking the delicate weave of negotiation. "These are mere myths, not history," he interjected, the crispness of his voice tinged with condescension. The dismissal hovered, a sharp edge that sliced through the camaraderie. I felt Ava's body stiffen, caught between her passion and his unwarranted arrogance. It was as if the room compressed, the shadows darkening in response to his words. The chief met Jake's gaze with a steady confidence, unruffled by the academic's derision. He continued, his tone unwavering, as he methodically outlined a set of conditions that felt dense with importance. Each phrase rolled off his tongue with a crisp, steady cadence, resonating in the space around us. Yet amidst his clarity, I could sense an undercurrent, an ambiguity threaded through his speech, suggesting layers of meaning meant only for those who dared to look beyond the surface. As he spoke, the low murmur of the nomads filled the air, a symphony of voices melding with the soft scrape of shifting sand beneath our feet. I found myself straining to listen, grasping at fragments of conversation that seemed to waltz just out of reach, too fleeting to capture. Shadows moved just beyond my periphery, and I couldn't shake the feeling that they were not merely bystanders. They were silent witnesses to an unfolding fate that lay heavier than we could anticipate. The chief paused, allowing the silence to swell, a heartbeat of time suspended as we processed the weight of his words. It was a deliberate tactic, heightening the tension, as our varied motivations wove a tangled web of intrigue. Ava's excitement warred against Noah's pragmatism, while Jake's skepticism brewed a tempest of conflict that hung palpably in the air. Then the chief turned slightly, his penetrating gaze settling on each of us, as though assessing our worthiness. A haunting image surfaced in my mind, a reminder of ancient legends where choices made within a circle could lead to ruin or revelation. I had read tales of foolish adventurers underestimating the very land that embraced them, and a tremor of doubt reverberated in my chest. "We stand at the edge of revelation and consequence," he said finally, the weight of his voice grounding us all. "A truth lies beyond the symbols that span both our worlds, yet it bears the burden of responsibility." Each word lingered, resonating in the courtyard as if echoing against the very stones that held witness to our gathering. The unease hung heavy as we contemplated his statements, a twisting spiral of thoughts mirroring the ancient patterns etched into the walls. Each of us grappled with our internal storms, seeking to decode his words while uncertain of what price truth might exact. In the harsh embrace of the desert, it dawned on me that we had embarked upon an intersection of fate, one where our sins, curiosities, and desires converged into a looming darkness that would not be easily overlooked. And so, we stood in the heart of the Nomads' world, feeling the weight of a history far beyond our own, our paths irrevocably entwined in a moment that echoed with ancient forewarnings. The horizon seemed to stretch before us like a labyrinth, with no promises of safe passage. Chapter 8: Secrets of the Shadow Veil. As dusk draped the desert like an unwelcome shroud, the flickering firelight danced through the circle of canvas tents, casting shadows that breathed with an eerie life of their own. The keeper of desert whispers stood before us, his voice echoing like the last tremors of an ancient drum, weaving threads of time and darkness, stirring something deep within, a quiet longing intertwined with a gnawing dread. His bronze skin, marked by intricate tattoos that glimmered softly in the waning light, bore the stories of 1,000 nights spent under a vast and indifferent sky. Layered indigo robes fluttered like the wings of twilight creatures as he spoke, his measured tones enveloping us. I leaned forward on the woven rug, the leather-bound notebook cradled in my lap, my pen poised as if waiting for the ink to imbibe the gravity of his words. "Celestial alignment," I murmured, translating his deliberate phrases, feeling their weight settle around us, a shroud of inevitable fate. Liam stood nearby, his rugged form a sharp contrast to the flowing robes of the elder. His well-worn leather journal lay open at his side, where the fading lines of his sketches clashed against the living symbols before him. His fingers tapped gently along the paper, a rhythmic accompaniment to the elder's rich voice, bridging the realm of the scholarly with that of the arcane. I caught the flicker of his excitement, an anxious thrill that underscored the air between us, his gaze flickering between the elder's wisdom and his own internal maps that told stories of secrets best left buried. I chanced to glance at Noah, ever the vigilant sentinel, his weathered hands deftly adjusting the strap of his gear. Each movement was infused with an urgency rooted in survival. He scanned our surroundings, eyes sharp and ready. The desert, with its myriad dangers, had honed him into a figure of purposeful control, and the low-light camp did little to ease the restless edge beneath his pragmatic exterior. There was a quiet tension that rippled between the men, an unspoken understanding that the world outside our canvas encampment was one of uncertainty, teeming with potential threats and unknown horrors. Beside me, Professor Jake scribbled in his notebook, the sound of his pen scraping the page merging with the crackling of the fire. "Record every detail," he murmured to himself, glancing occasionally at Liam with an air of polite condescension. In his mind, every myth laid bare before him should succumb to reason. I could see the fine lines of skepticism etched into his brow, where intellectual ambition danced dangerously close to derision. As the elder spoke of celestial bodies and whispers of the earth, I sensed Jake's struggle, a dance of disbelief battling against the quiet possibility that the otherworldly might harbor grains of truth. The elder's voice crescendoed, powerful, echoing like ancient incantations beneath the glowing night sky. "The stars are not mere decorations of the darkened canvas. They are eyes watching, waiting." His words rolled over us like a fine mist, tinged with both awe and an underlying sense of foreboding. The lore of his people reached out, enticing yet threatening. With every phrase, I felt myself being pulled closer into the folds of his narrative. They whisper the secrets of the desert, its shadowed knowledge hidden within the markings of time. And there it was, the rising tide of unease mingling with curiosity. As he continued, I scribbled furiously, feeling the pulse of revelation surge through me, demanding my attention, urging me toward comprehension. Each translation bore weight as it pressed against my mind, crafting connections with my dreams that had haunted my nights, culminating in a singular purpose, to unravel the enigma laid before us. As the fire crackled and the shadows shifted, I could not shake the sense that we were not merely observers in this sacred moment, but participants in something grand and terrifying, our fates interwoven with the very fabric of the ancient knowledge being revealed. The elder's cadence grew slower, more deliberate. He spoke of desert spirits, of lost civilizations carried away on winds that whispered of their former glory. Each symbol painted in the air like fleeting memories, visions from another world. Liam's tapping intensified, a tangible manifestation of his eagerness, blending seamlessly with the elder's chants, a connection I could almost feel across the expanse of our small gathering. In this circle of seasoned explorers, a dark promise lay nestled within the tent flaps, the future looming just beyond our sight. I stole a glance at Noah, who maintained his focused demeanor even as the uncanny tales took shape before us, and I could see in his alert posture a stirring of thoughts, perhaps reminders of the dangers that lurked not just within the sand, but within each of us. As the flames danced higher, reaching toward the unforgiving sky, it was clear that we were bound to this moment, woven into a story that transcended our own desires. The weight of the elder's words wrapped around my chest, tight and suffocating, while a specter of unease watched from the fringes of our circle. I felt the thrill of a storm gathering, a tempest of questions and fears, and in the depths of my mind I whispered promises to face whatever darkness awaited us. Inside the cramped tent, the air hung heavy with a mix of dust and ink, the dim glow of lantern light casting stark shadows that twisted and warped against the walls. As I perched on a rough wooden stool, the faded parchment map lay before us, a cryptic tapestry beckoning with unanswered questions and undiscovered paths that loomed just beyond our reach. Noah, ever the pragmatist, unfolded the map with deliberate care, the faint rustle of parchment igniting an intensity in the room. The symbols etched upon it, faded yet distinct, pulsed with the remnants of ancient secrets, drawing our eyes as if some unseen force guided us toward their revelations. His fingers traced the markings, each movement deliberate as he spoke. These lines indicate significant locations. The elder's symbols match with the paths. I leaned closer, curiosity stirring in my chest, watching the intricate dance of his hands over the faded ink, reminding me of constellations suspended above the desert. Each stroke felt prophetic, almost alive, and with each phrase spoken, I became acutely aware of how fragile our grasp on understanding was, balanced delicately against the backdrop of tales that whispered of unimaginable horrors. Right here, Noah continued, his voice steady yet tinged with urgency, is where the last tribe recorded sightings of the celestial phenomena. Ava's pen flew across her notebook, diligently translating the elder's recitation, a testament to her intellectual prowess, yet I noticed a flicker of anxiety in her posture. She scribbled intensely, her brow furrowed, echoing her fierce determination to wrest knowledge from the unknown, though her own expressions betrayed an ever-present dread. As she murmured softly in forgotten languages, her concentration wrapped around her like a protective cocoon, obscuring the mounting chaos outside her focused mind. "Look at this," Liam said, excitement crackling in his voice as he leaned over the map, his presence an eager shadow beside Noah's resolute stance. He pointed with an intensity that electrified the air. "These markings match exactly with what I saw in my dreams, the promise of forgotten truths. We need to explore this area. This is it." My heart quickened at the sound of his fervent conviction, but beneath it, an unshakable knot tightened in my stomach, an unwelcoming sensation tinged with a premonition. The map became a double-edged sword, enticing yet foreboding. Every detail felt imbued with a history that threatened to engulf us as we ventured forth. Across from us, Professor Jake adjusted his glasses, studying our eager enthusiasm with a faint smirk. His tight-lipped skepticism exuded an air of superiority, even in this dim light. Historically speaking, these markings hold no merit unless they can be traced back to. Maybe it's not all about history, Liam interjected, an edge in his tone. Maybe what we're facing is beyond the confines of empirical evidence. Jake's brow furrowed, his clipped responses revealing the cracks in his facade of reason. If you cannot prove it through a scholarly lens, then it holds no value. We cannot. Enough, Noah interrupted, the tension palpable in his weathered voice drawing their attention. We have to prioritize the mission. Time is fleeting, and the desert waits for no one. There was a muted consensus as we returned to gathering our equipment, the air thick with both urgency and unspoken fears. I stowed my notebooks, feeling the weight of responsibility settle in the pit of my stomach as I considered what we were stepping into. Each piece of gear felt like a talisman, a precarious shield against the unknown. The camp around us bustled with muted energy, preparations giving way to the thrill of impending discovery. Ava's sharp eyes flicked between her notes and the parchment, focused yet fraught with an underlying anxiety, while Liam exchanged excited glances with Noah, ever hopeful. Jake, however, retreated deeper into his notes, the meticulous arrangement of his observations counterbalancing the unpredictability that simmered within the group. As I shouldered my pack, I felt the gravity of our shared journey enveloping us, pressing down as if the very desert itself were conspiring to test our resolve. We were bound to one another in our quest for truth, but I sensed the fractures too, each mind tethered to its own inner battle, as we prepared to step into the vast, unforgiving expanse outside the safety of our tents. "Prepare yourselves," Noah commanded, his weathered features illuminated in the lantern light, firm yet resolute. "We must move now." Those words hung heavy in the air, an unyielding edict that snapped our focus back to the moment. As we each nodded, collecting our breath and shifting our stances, the tension mounted, a palpable bridge spanning our expectations, fears, and desires, ushering us toward the darkness that awaited in the encroaching night. With one last glance at the dimly lit tent, where shadows danced like figments of our imagination, I felt a primal urge, an urging toward the unknown, perhaps echoing the ancient whispers of the elder we had just left. The desert awaited, its secrets tucked behind the silences of its vast expanse, and with one final shared breath, we stepped forward into the dark, resolute yet uneasy, bound by curiosity, and haunted by the shadows of what lay ahead. Chapter 9: The Guardian's Test. As I stepped into the narrow clearing, the air thickened, pregnant with dread, swirling dust around my boots like whispering secrets. Jagged stones underfoot crunched with a soft, sinister melody, the ground cracking open beneath our presence. At the heart of this forsaken place, the Guardian awaited, a shimmering figment hovering on the cusp of reality, beckoning us with an arm extended, a spectral harbinger of our unfolding fate. I could sense the rest of the team flanking me, their breaths suspended, caught somewhere between apprehension and awe. Each movement seemed to incite a chorus of muffled sounds, like the earth itself stifling a gasp in response to our intrusion. The oppressive silence was palpable, yet I felt an electric pulse of potential, as if the very stones were alive with ancient whispers, urging us to retreat, yet simultaneously compelling us forward. The Guardian's presence thrummed through the air, a translucent figure that wavered and pulsed, twisting light into strange, almost alluring shapes. It shifted as if molded by the wind itself, embodying the architecture of Ithara, the very city I had obsessed over in countless sleepless nights. I gripped my worn leather journal, the frayed edges brushing against my fingers, a comfort amidst the unnerving landscape. My heart raced as I scanned the figure, the familiar sketches of spires and arches flooding my mind. Ava stood nearby, the weight of aged scrolls balanced in her arms, her face set with fierce determination. Her striking blue eyes, framed by long, dark hair tied neatly behind her, flickered toward me as if seeking reassurance, yet I knew we were all adrift in this unsettling void. Her fingers moved deftly, adjusting the scrolls with practiced ease, each action deliberate, as though attempting to fend off the creeping chill that settled over us. Noah, the pragmatic survivalist, was to my left, his muscular form steadying as he placed his survival knife deliberately on the cracked ground. It struck the stone with a soft thud, an anchor in this sea of uncertainty. He removed his gloves with calculated precision, leaving his hands bare, resolute in the face of whatever awaited us. I could feel his wariness, the careful skepticism that often flared into sharp critique of those around him. Professor Jake Hastings, the formidable academic, towered at the fringe of our circle, the light catching his wire-rimmed glasses and illuminating the furrowed brows that beset his austere countenance. He studied the crumbling stone altar, a hint of condescension marring his features as he whispered under his breath, "Historically speaking, we've entered a fool's paradise." His skepticism echoed in the charged air, contrasting the vibrant authority that the Guardian now exuded. The Guardian's voice, resonant and omnipresent, disrupted our musings. "Tarry not, face thy prescribed trial." Its words wove through the atmosphere like tendrils of smoke, wrapping around us in a choking embrace. The landscape shifted subtly, the shadows deepening as the light within the Guardian pulsed, a reminder of the trial to come. I felt my hands tremble as I fumbled with my pencil, trying to capture the essence of this moment, the jagged edges of reality blurring with the ethereal. "I record what is shown," I replied, the words tumbling out in a rush, my fixation on Ithara constricting my thoughts. The trembling sketched lines, mirroring the chaos in my mind. "Thou art ensnared by dreams of lost Ithara," the Guardian intoned, the echo sending shivers down my spine. Next, it fixed its luminous gaze upon Ava. The atmosphere shifted, heavy with the anticipation of judgment. "Thou art bound by solitude." I watched her stiffen, a reflexive reaction, as her fingers flicked through the brittle pages of her manuscript. Yet even in this tension, there was a methodical clarity to her demeanor. "I document every sign," she offered, her tone unwavering, a careful shield against the Guardian's probing. As it turned toward Noah, the space crackled anew, the Guardian circling him with an almost predatory grace. "I need no adornment of fear," he declared, removing his gloves as if casting aside the remnants of caution, displaying raw readiness in the face of whatever awaited. Finally, the Guardian fixed its gaze on Professor Jake, the tension palpable. He adjusted his spectacles, leaning toward the ancient relief carved on the stone. "Facts await my scrutiny," he murmured, the words tinged with a strained confidence, an assertion of his beliefs against the backdrop of an uncertain truth. "Let belief be unmade," the Guardian declared, and as its voice resonated, the harsh wind stirred, whipping sand around us in frantic spirals. We stood there, suspended in a moment thick with anticipation, the shadows growing longer, enmeshing us in a cocoon of doubt. The stillness of the clearing gripped us as the Guardian loomed, an eternal sentinel standing guard at the threshold of our fates, awaiting our responses with an unwavering stare. The Guardian's gaze settled upon me, a weighty curtain drawn against the backdrop of my psyche, pulling forth dreams woven with Ithara's enigmatic silhouette. I felt my hands tremble against the parchment, the pencil skittering as I sought to transcribe the unspeakable, my heart thrumming in chaotic rhythm with the pulse of an unseen world. It was as if the very fabric of my existence hinged upon this moment, both electrifying and dreadful, a spectral judgment beckoning my most concealed truths. "Thou art ensnared by dreams of lost Ithara," the guardian proclaimed, and I bristled, every fiber of my being clenching at its words. They resonated within me like the final stroke on a flayed canvas, revealing the sharpest contours of my obsession. I realized with a pang that the city, steeped in my every waking moment and darkening my dreams, had become both my muse and my prison. "I record what is shown," I muttered, my voice almost breaking, cloaked in defiance yet dripping with an underlying despair. The lines I sketched began to warp, transforming into frenzied shapes that echoed the madness in my heart. The guardian pulsed, shifting in tandem with my unease, a reflection of my fractured mind. Then the entity shifted its focus toward Ava. "Thou art bound by solitude," it intoned, the weight of its words pressing heavily upon her. I watched as her composure faltered momentarily. Her fingers trembled over the brittle pages, a subtle crack betraying her practiced facade. There was an unguarded intensity to her eyes, as if the truth was warring within her, clashing against the walls she had so carefully erected. "I document every sign," she replied, her tone firm yet tinged with vulnerability, an invocation of power in the face of an acknowledgement that cut deeper than any blade. I marveled at her fierce independence, yet saw the chasm of solitude stretching behind her. Noah stood steadfast, and as the guardian's gaze drifted to him, I felt an anticipatory shift in the air. The guardian circled him, its presence tightening like a vice. "I need no adornment of fear," he asserted, his voice rough but resolute, stripped of embellishments. I could see the muscles in his jaw tense, his features momentarily clouded by an internal struggle. This was a man accustomed to hardship, yet there lingered a hint of wariness. Was he ready to confront the roots of his emotional distance? As he removed his gloves with meticulous care, a small act of surrender lay hidden beneath the surface. I wondered if he sought to expose not just his hands, but the barriers he had erected against any semblance of connection. The guardian's gaze then settled on Professor Jake, his lofty skepticism palpable. "Facts await my scrutiny," he murmured, a feeble attempt at control veiling his unease. The words left his lips laced with condescension, but I sensed the tremor beneath his confidence, a churning sea of doubt battling against the tide of empirical truth he so tightly clung to. Yet the guardian seemed unimpressed, gliding closer, its presence suffocating. "Let belief be unmade," it intoned, and I could feel the air around us distort, as if echoing an unnameable dread. Jake's bravado faltered. I could see the doubt slicing through him as the room closed in, an enclosure where logic itself seemed to unravel. In that moment, as the guardian continued to pulse with latent energy, a stillness enveloped the clearing, thick like the heavy breath of a predator poised to strike. The sand around us whirled as if alive, mocking our hesitant stances, binding us in anticipation. Each of us lingered at the precipice of some unthinkable fate, haunted by the shadows of our past sins and insecurities. There was no escape from the coming trial. We were irrevocably entwined with our own haunted truths. With each moment, a bleak horizon loomed before us, charged with tension, ready to swallow our minds in its vast abyss. Chapter 10: Ithara Unveiled. As we stepped through the undulating barrier that separated our reality from the remnant echoes of a forgotten civilization, the world ahead seemed to throb with a heartbeat of its own. Shadows clung to the crumbling forms of ancient spires, a distorted skyline marked by the scars of time, and I felt the familiar weight of my leather journal against my side, its pages alive with the promise of mysteries yet to unfurl. The guardian's distant voice still lingered in the air, a muted echo of authority reminding us of our trespass into the ethereal ruins of Ithara. I led the way, a mingling of exhilaration and trepidation coursing through my veins as I tightened my grip on the journal. Each flicker of the dying sunlight caressed the fragmented stone like a lover retreating into shadows, whispering secrets into the desolation that surrounded us. Ava walked beside me, the soft rustle of her practical field clothes adding an unsettling rhythm to our footsteps. Her gaze darted to the mottled stonework, a deep hunger stirring in her bright blue eyes. In her hand, she cradled a small pouch of translated texts, each one an echo of languages long forgotten, their significance tugging at her intellect like the promise of uncharted depths. Noah lagged slightly behind, ever the sentinel. His movements were measured, muscles coiled beneath sun-baked skin, alert and wary. He scanned the horizon with narrowed eyes, seeking shadows that stirred in corners unseen. The survival knife strapped to his side was not just a tool, it was a symbol of his instinctual wariness in unknown territories. "Keep your eyes peeled," he murmured, his voice a low growl that barely broke the silence. There was an unease etched on his face, a subtle warning that belied his pragmatic nature. Professor Jake was a stark contrast. The clicking of his camera punctuated the air, a brisk declaration of his authority over the findings before us. "Every crumbling stone tells a story," he pronounced, as though he could winnow truth from decay with nothing but the pointed lens of his determination. He moved with the rhythm of a metronome, steadfast in his beliefs, meticulously documenting the angle of each ruin, as if each detail were a stepping stone on the path to vindication. As we halted at the threshold of an open square, the grandness of the desolation unfolded before us. Shattered columns stood like sentinels bearing witness to an era lost in the mists of time. Murals, once vibrant and bold, faded into obscurity, whispering tales of past glory now twisted with the mold of decay. I felt a shiver race along my spine, a premonition as tangible as the dust motes that danced in the slants of dim light. Each gust of wind seemed to carry the whispered lamentations of a forgotten people. Here, in this unholy silence, we faced the paradox of beauty entwined with terror, a testament to humanity's hubris etched into stone. "There's something almost haunting about this place," Ava breathed, her voice barely rising above the hushed stillness. She leaned in closer to the nearest shattered column, her fingers grazing the surface as though attempting to coax its stories back into the light. "Yes," I murmured, feeling the pulse of the moment resonate within my chest, both a warning and an invitation. My pencil glided across the surface of my journal, the strokes quickening as my heart raced at the sight of the endless riddles carved into the ruins before us. And yet, as I sketched the outlines of those broken forms, a shadow darted at the edge of my vision, too swift, too sudden to be a mere trick of the light. I glanced toward Noah, whose tensed muscles spoke of apprehension. I could see the gears of caution whirring in his mind. "Did you all see that?" he exclaimed, a sharp edge of uncertainty cracking his otherwise stoic demeanor. The moment hung suspended, and I felt the weight of our collective breath, the chill of anticipation wrapping around us, drawing us into a fragile web of silence. Each glance exchanged spoke volumes, an acknowledgement of the danger that lurked just beyond the periphery of our understanding, and the irresistible pull of the enigma that beckoned us deeper into the shadows of Ithara. We stepped into the hollow shell of the grand hall, where the walls rose like ancient giants, bowed under the weight of time. In the dim light, shadows danced upon the remnants of a vibrant mural, fading echoes of artistry, now cloaked in the pallor of decay, a reminder of the beauty that once held this place alight. The air hung thick with the musty scent of ancient dust, mingling with a palpable sense of the past that wrapped around us, inviting and yet oppressive. Ava was quick to kneel before the mural, the precision in her movements resembling a surgeon at work. She brushed dust away, revealing the intricacies of the carved imagery with an almost reverent touch. "Look!" she exclaimed softly, her intensity surging as she pointed to the figures entwined in a ritualistic dance, their expressions captured in frozen ecstasy. These inscriptions mirror those on the parchment we found at the previous site. They tell a story of sacrifice, of offering to the gods. I crouched beside her, feeling the stirrings of admiration mixed with an insatiable curiosity. My pencil flew across the pages of my journal, each stroke imbued with the desire to capture not just the details, but the essence of a civilization that had been ensnared in the grasp of time. The swirls of the figures were echoed in the fervor with which Ava spoke, her enthusiasm sparking a fire within me. "You see how they're dressed?" I interjected. "The fabrics depicted, it reflects their culture, their standing in society." Noah lingered at the doorway, arms crossed tightly against his chest, a silhouette of vigilance against the backdrop of the hall. "Careful," he warned, eyes flicking toward the encroaching shadows that dared to whisper at the edges of our gathering. His weathered demeanor held the subtle tension of a man who knew the dangers of too much trust placed in the relics of the past. Meanwhile, Jake was already at the base of the mural, probing the surface with the tip of his gloved finger. "Historical interpretation demands accuracy," he admonished, the clipped tone of his voice betraying both skepticism and authority. "Legends are not history, merely artifacts of cultural imagination." His glasses slipped down his nose as he scrutinized the faded symbols, raising an eyebrow as he shook his head slightly. "But these legends have significance," Ava countered, her voice a sharp contrast to his dismissive air. "They represent a narrative, a worldview. You cannot understand the past without acknowledging the beliefs that shaped it." Jake's expression darkened. "The evidence suggests otherwise," he replied, dismissing her arguments with the wave of a hand. "These images can lead us astray. They are not facts, but rather reflections of what people wished to believe." Their voices blended into a low hum, a cadence of intellectual friction that danced around the central truth of our exploration. Each claim, each assertion, became a thread woven into a larger tapestry, even as the shadow of doubt curled at the edges of my consciousness. As I sketched, the atmosphere thickened, drawn taut by their contrasting views. The mural loomed before us, a haunting reminder of lost narratives etched into stone, taunting us with fragments of truth forever beyond our reach. "We must tread carefully," I murmured, glancing back to Noah, whose guarded stance suggested he understood the danger in their debates. He stood like a sentinel, a living metaphor of the wilderness outside this hollow tomb. In that moment, as the debate reached its boiling point, I couldn't shake the sensation of something watching, an invisible eye tracking our every move. My heart raced, fueled by both excitement and an unsettling dread. I focused again on the mural, willing myself to pierce through the layers of meaning wrapped around these ancient figures. Ava knelt closer, her fingers delicately tracing the surface as if to breathe life back into the faded colors. "It's more than just imagery," she said, her voice wavering with fervor. "These are testimonies of devotion, messages begging to be deciphered." Devotion or delusion? Jake's question lingered in the air, an unresolved query that ignited a fragile tension within our group. I opened my mouth to speak, to bridge the divide, but a creaking sound cut through the silence, a dissonant note that shattered the intensity of our academic debate. It echoed off the walls, reverberating through the grand hall like a ghostly laughter, eliciting an instinctual reaction from us all. The air felt heavy with uncertainty, as though the spirits of those who had once roamed this place were warning us against our intrusion. My gaze darted to the entryway where Noah stood, eyes narrowed and breath held. The darkness beyond seemed to shift, almost alive, urging us to acknowledge our fragility in the face of time's relentless march. The moment crystallized into an urgent stillness, binding us in collective anticipation, as we waited for the hall to reveal its final secrets. The narrow corridor stretched ahead like a gaping maw, its stone floor uneven and littered with fragments of the past, an archaic puzzle waiting to swallow us whole. We pressed forward, the darkness clinging to us like a shroud, intensifying the claustrophobic pulse of our expedition. I could sense the weight of unspoken fears hovering in the air, binding us together as we stepped into the unknown. Professor Jake took the lead, a steadfast figure whose notes served as his armor against the encroaching shadows. He moved with precision, glancing at each carving that graced the walls, his pen scratching against paper in a rhythmic drone, a stark reminder of the task ahead. This section appears to feature depictions of ancestral rites, he stated, his tone laced with authority that dared us to question him. No doubt influenced by their cosmology, I ventured, matching his cadence as I followed closely behind. There was an odd comfort in our exchange, a momentary alliance forged in the murky waters of exploration. The energy in the air felt palpable, as if the stones were quivering under the weight of our inquiry. Noah walked at a slight distance, vigilant and watchful, eyes scanning the shifting shadows as if each flicker could betray hidden dangers. I could see the tension etched in his brow, the tightness of his jaw. Each creak of stone echoed around us, magnifying the isolation that settled like a cloak over our expedition. "Keep your senses sharp," he warned, pausing at a dark corner where the light faded into ink. "This place isn't just a relic of the past. It could very well harbor threats we cannot foresee." His words hung in the air, reverberating off the damp stone as we pressed onward. I felt a chill creep up my spine, a reminder that our presence was a disturbance in the slumbering realm of the ancient. Suddenly, I paused before a sealed door adorned with intricate symbols, their meaning shrouded in my uncertainty. My fingers traced the grooves of the lettering, the contact reverberating through me with a sense of gravity. What secrets might lie behind this door? What truths had the ages buried? "Liam, look at these markings," Ava urged, stepping beside me, her eyes alight with a fervor that spoke to her obsession with language. The urgency in her voice cut through the weighty air, and I shifted my position to capture every detail in my journal. Her presence beside me was electric, a tether, drawing me back from the encroaching darkness that threatened to envelop my curiosity. "These are a call to the ancients," she stated, her intensity igniting the air between us. "We must unlock this door. It begs for recognition." "I agree, but we must be careful," I countered, sensing No's watchful eye upon us, the guardian of our caution as our discussions gathered weight. These symbols might serve a purpose beyond our understanding. We could be inviting in something we cannot control. But before our conversation could further ignite, an unsettling movement caught No's eye. A swift shadow darted through the corridor, slithering past the edge of my vision, a dark wisp that sent a chill coursing through my veins. "Did you see that?" he exclaimed, his voice taut with surprise, halting our dialogue in an instant. We froze, an intricate web of tension weaving itself among us as the darkened corridor held its breath, ensnaring us in a moment suspended in time. The air felt charged with an electric intensity, the shadows around us thickening, as if a great darkness had awakened, drawing closer to eavesdrop on our uncertainties. I strained my eyes against the depths of the corridor, searching for the source of our sudden alert. But it had vanished, replaced by a pregnant stillness that prickled at my skin. My heart raced, both from fear and the thrill of the unknown. I exchanged glances with Ava and Noah, our collective worry threading through the silence, unifying us in an invisible bond. "Stay close," Jake commanded, his voice firm yet layered with uncertainty. It was as if the very stones recognized the gravity of the moment, holding their breath alongside us. I shifted my gaze back to the door, feeling an urge pulling me closer. The symbols began to dance before my eyes, swirling in a seductive rhythm, promising secrets yet revealed. "This door, it's more than a threshold," I whispered, my fingers trembling against the carved surface. "It feels like a heartbeat waiting to be released." Ava leaned closer, her breath quickening as she absorbed the moment. "It begs for our understanding," she echoed, a fervor stirring in her voice. No's jaw tightened, his stance still vigilant as the shadows danced just out of reach. "We should remain cautious. This may very well be a trap." Just then, a distant sound reverberated through the corridor, a faint echo of something moving. Perhaps the city itself was stirring in response to our intrusion. We collectively leaned into the sound, drawing even closer together as the darkness pressed around us, the weight of the unknown looming ever larger. The tension reached a boiling point as the shadow darted again, this time more deliberate, its movement almost taunting. "We need to decide now," Noah urged, his voice low yet heavy with urgency. We were teetering on the precipice of revelation, caught between the pull of history and the dread of what might awaken as we breached the threshold of the lost city. In that frozen moment, I felt the exhilaration of discovery twist with the anxiety of foreboding, a fine line between genius and madness, the heartbeat of Ithara thumping beneath our feet, calling us ever deeper into the maze of shadows. Chapter 11. Echoes of the Past. The moment we crossed the threshold of the shattered archway, I felt an unshakable tension creep up my spine. The ancient stones exuded a chill, a testament to the centuries of decay and neglect. And yet there was something intoxicating about the air, thick with the weight of history, heavy with dread. The vast courtyard sprawled before us, a desolate expanse, its cobblestones worn smooth beneath our feet, each step echoing as if the ground remembered the fleeting presence of life that once thrived here. Moss clung to the remnants of stone walls, softening their jagged edges, while faded murals danced like specters against the backdrop of a past long surrendered to time. As I ran my calloused fingers along a particularly damp section of wall, the rough texture felt alive beneath my touch, reminding me that this place bore witness to desperate last stands, the ultimate fight against the encroaching darkness. I could almost hear the ghostly echoes of the men and women who had stood here before me, their voices rising in a cacophony of fear and defiance. Ava moved beside me, crouching low, her gloved hand tracing the carved symbols on a half-crumbled inscription. "The curse fell on us all," she recited, her voice steady, yet tinged with an unsettling reverence. There was something almost feverish in the way she immersed herself in the language, the syllables slipping from her tongue with an almost hypnotic allure. In that moment, I understood her obsession. These words were more than just relics, they were gateways to a truth we had not yet unearthed. Noah knelt beside a pile of scattered relics, his brow furrowed as he scrutinized each fragment of our forsaken past. He lifted a rusted sword fragment, its edges jagged like the memories we had come to dissect, while a charred piece of cloth lay nestled beneath debris, its fabric whispering tales of flames and sorrow. As he turned it over in his hands, I caught a glimpse of the pragmatism that defined him, a guarded acknowledgement of the past's weight. "This is no ordinary ruin," he remarked, his voice low, yet edged with a hint of dread. A low rustle, akin to the breath of a sleeping beast, swept through the courtyard as Professor Jake flicked open his notebook, jotting notes with brisk, measured strokes. The wind, once a mere sigh, carried the disquiet of the stone giants looming around us. "Historically speaking," he began, oblivious to the atmosphere thickening around us, "the implications of these findings could elevate our understanding of the period." His tone remained clinical, even as shadows danced around us, and I felt the weight of his skepticism clawing at the fraying edges of my own curiosity. We silently shifted our focus from the crumbling artifacts to the overarching ruins, caught in a shared moment of contemplation, as dread curled around us like smoke. The cracked stone beneath my feet seemed to whisper forgotten stories, its silence filled with the weight of loss. I could sense the tensions between us. We were not simply colleagues, but hunters chasing whispers of the past, each of us bound by our obsessions, each of us fleeing our own ghosts. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting elongated shadows that wrapped around the skeletal remains of Ithara's civilization. A collective pause enveloped us. Each of us absorbed the gravity of this place, haunted remnants interlacing with the patterns of our own lives. The archway behind us loomed like a gaping maw, swallowing the light of day and marking our entrance into a world that felt both dangerous and electric, the echo of what we might uncover trembling in the air like a heartbeat. As we pressed onward into the narrow corridor framed by crumbling columns, an unsettling awareness of confinement enveloped me, the walls closing in like the tightening grip of fate. Dust motes hung in the waning light, illuminated by flickering beams of our lamps, casting irregular shadows that danced upon the stone as if they were alive with the memories of those long gone. It was here, amidst the decay, that the very essence of Ithara revealed itself, a place burdened by whispers of forbidden knowledge, as though even the air was laced with secrets best left undiscovered. Liam paused before a fractured bas-relief, his gaze fixated on the intricate figures carved into the stone, their expressions frozen in terror and defiance. I could see the tension in his posture as he approached, fingers hovering just above the surface, as if to extract meaning from the delicate depictions of a battle long lost. Each line of the artwork told a story, an anguished cry, a desperate reach for salvation, and I sensed the echo of his own fixation, a man driven to bridge the chasm between past and present. What were they thinking in their final moments? He murmured, more to himself than to us, the words slipping into the silence like tendrils of despair. The air grew heavier with his contemplation, an uninvited weight that felt like a collective burden resting upon us. Ava shifted next to him, her portable lamp casting a pool of light upon the inscription beneath the relief. "These markings speak of forbidden lore," she pronounced, her voice steady and captivating, infused with the fire of her passion. I could see how the light reflected in her striking blue eyes, revealing a glimpse of the intensity that defined her pursuit of knowledge. With practiced precision, she adjusted the lamp, illuminating the characters that wove their stories into the air around us. Each word felt charged, alive with the promise of what lay beneath the surface, and I could not help but feel that some of those promises were perilous. Noah knelt beside them, his muscular hands unearthing a dented shield from beneath a pile of debris. As he turned it over, revealing scorch marks and deep gouges, I could see the flicker of realization in his eyes, an acknowledgement of the violence that had once erupted in this very place. "This isn't just history," he stated quietly, the tension evident in his tone. This was a battleground. The weight of his pragmatism pressed down upon me. There was a lesson here, a warning etched in the relics of the past, urging caution as we ventured deeper. Professor Jake, ever the sentinel of empirical reason, hovered nearby, his pen scratching briskly against the notepad. "Every detail here confirms our potential to unearth greatness," he observed, the dismissal of mystical interpretations evident in the clipped tones of his voice. Yet beneath his certainty lay an undercurrent of trepidation, an acknowledgement that even he could not completely silence the whispers curling through the stones. His meticulous attention was directed at the past's dissection rather than its revelations. I wondered if his skepticism would lead him astray. In the narrow corridor, we began to intertwine, drawing closer not just as colleagues but as explorers of a shared plight. Collective apprehension swept over us as the shadows flickered at the edges of our awareness. I caught a glimpse of their faces, drawn and etched with the weight of our surroundings, each of us seeking refuge in our obsessions while straining against the unseen forces lurking beyond the veil of memory. The atmosphere shifted as we faced the uncertainty lying ahead. A distant sound echoed in the hollow corridor, a scuffle, perhaps, a reminder that we were not alone in this labyrinth of echoes and shadows. I exchanged glances with the others, silent questions hanging in the air, unresolved, as we steeled ourselves against what awaited us in the dark. Near the partially collapsed rotunda, we gathered around a display of relics scattered across the dusty stone floor, the weight of our discoveries mingling with the air of despair that clung to the remains of this fallen civilization. The atmosphere felt thick, almost tangible, and the remnants of their hasty retreat whispered of unfulfilled destinies, intertwining with the pulse of urgency that thrummed through us all. As I clenched a broken ceramic artifact, fragments of their past merging with the fragments of my own restless soul, I could almost hear the lamentations of those who had once called this forsaken place home. My fingers traced the jagged edge of the ceramic, a reflection of their abrupt departure that spoke to the fear and desperation of those who had once thrived here. I caught glimpses of what had been, flashes of joy, sorrow, and chaos, all interwoven in the very fabric of this civilization's demise. It stirred a familiarity within me, igniting a compulsion to piece together their lives, to understand the full tapestry of their existence. Beside me, Ava leaned over a weathered slab, her intensity palpable as she focused the lens of her portable scanner on the inscription that had emerged from obscurity. With a precision that made her seem almost reverent, she translated the inscriptions, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. "They speak of a warning, a final message," she murmured, adjusting the device to better capture the details. It was as if she conjured forth the very voices of the ancients, weaving their histories with the tangible present, refusing to let them slip back into the dark. Noah had taken a practical approach, laying out the findings on a flat piece of stone. He meticulously arranged the fragments, tracing the timeline of their hurried evacuation, a physical representation of their plight in those final hours. "It wasn't just a battle," he noted, his voice heavy with realization. "It was a scramble, a chaotic flight." The urgency in his tone ignited a collective unease, forcing us to confront the truth that these ruins held not just remnants, but also echoes of peril that lingered beyond our understanding. As Professor Jake hovered on the fringes of our findings, tapping his pen against his notepad, he issued a directive that rang with a sense of purpose, yet felt overshadowed by an unspeakable weight. "Collect every shard. These remnants are our blueprint," he stated briskly, his ambition leaping forward in the face of our caution. But there was an undercurrent of tension among us. The more we uncovered, the more the air seemed to crackle with foreboding. I watched as their eyes darted from the relics to each other, silently wrestling with their conflicting emotions. We stood poised on the brink of revelation, and in that moment, the shifting of rubble broke the silence, a grating noise that set our hearts racing and drew our focus away from our discoveries. Each of us turned instinctively, tension rippling through the group as the shadows danced in the corners of the rotunda, whispering warnings we struggled to decipher. There was a shared apprehension, an acknowledgement that perhaps we were not meant to unearth the burdens buried in the stones, that the past was protective of its secrets. As we exchanged glances filled with unspoken fear and curiosity, it became clear we were intertwined in a dance with a long-dead civilization, one whose legacy might not want to be disturbed. The artifacts we uncovered, once mere fragments of history, now felt like chains binding us to a truth that would not remain buried. In that fleeting instant, the ruins of Ithara enveloped us, promising either enlightenment or calamity, and I couldn't shake the foreboding sense that we were teetering dangerously close to discovering which fate awaited us. Chapter 12: The Sealed Chamber. I stood before the heavy stone door, its surface marred by time and worn with secrets, while the air thickened around us, charged with unsaid fears. My fingers brushed over the cold, textured stone, tracing the intricate time-worn murals that told stories I dared not decipher. In this moment, it was not just the weight of stone before me that pressed down, it was the crushing enormity of what lay behind it, the echoes of the past whispering through the cracks of the present. Professor Jake Hastings, with his scholarly gravitas, placed his palm firmly on the door, the chill of the stone seemingly contrasting with the fervent warmth radiating from his determination. "We proceed now," he declared, his voice cutting through the tension, reverberating off the ancient walls as if daring the darkness beyond. I felt a tremor within me, an unsettling dance of anticipation and dread, my hand involuntarily clenching the worn leather of my journal, the very vessel of my obsession. Each passing second carried the weight of unspoken histories, and I was painfully aware of my own inadequacies. Ava stood a few paces away, the corner of her mouth quirked in a knowing semblance of concentration. Her striking blue eyes scanned the cryptic symbols etched into the stone, calculating and steady. She appeared unfazed, and yet I could sense her mind racing beneath the surface. As her fingers moved gracefully, calculating the angles and meanings, I pondered what lay beyond this formidable boundary. The dim light flickered, casting eerie shadows upon her features, sharpening her intensity into something otherworldly. Noah, a silent guardian in our midst, maintained a watchful perimeter, his muscular build and sun-bleached hair grounding the anxiety that simmered amongst us. The ease with which he adapted to nature had hardened him against the unknown, and I envied his unwavering focus. Yet, beneath the surface of his rugged exterior lay a tumultuous sea of thoughts I wished to grasp. I could almost hear the taut silence of his unspoken questions, clashing with the fluttering chaos inside my own mind. As the door loomed larger, it commanded my attention. Its weighty presence felt like a judgment. I shuddered, my heart thrumming to an unsteady rhythm that resonated within my very bones. The faded illustrations seemed alive in their decay, whispering secrets of ancient rituals, beckoning us to uncover the truths hidden within the abyss. Professor Jake, oblivious to my turmoil, brandished a rusty metal key, its ornate engravings glinting in the glow of a sputtering lantern. It looked like the kind of key that might unlock centuries of dust, but perhaps it would also release something sinister. The camera would capture the moment as Jake inserted the key into the ancient lock, dust swirling in the beam of the lantern, a fleeting dance reminiscent of ghosts long departed. My breath caught in my throat, suspended between hope and dread. I had anticipated this moment, yet as the mechanism began to yield, I felt the eerie heaviness of the atmosphere coalesce, transforming anticipation into something more sinister. With a creaking protest that sent shivers cascading down my spine, the door began to shift. The echo of stone grinding against stone reverberated through the narrow corridor, an ominous sound that heralded what awaited us. We collectively braced ourselves, our bodies inching closer to the threshold of the unknown. The world as we knew it hung in the balance, ready to plunge into depths both unfathomable and terrifying. As the door finally yielded to our combined trepidation, a gust of stale air surged past us, laden with the weight of ancient shadows. I could feel the chill clawing at the edges of my sanity, as motes of dust stirred in the dim light, suspended like forgotten memories caught in a web of time. The scent of decay mixed with something more acrid, as though the very stones had absorbed centuries of despair, drawing me deeper into the heart of forgotten secrets. The unlocking mechanism continued its song of discontent, low, resonant clicks that echoed ominously against the cracked walls, each note like a heartbeat in a silent chamber. I felt my heart mirror the rhythm, pounding in time with the anticipation that swelled within me. The creaking door finally gave way, revealing a yawning darkness, a gaping mouth of oblivion, the only illumination being the faint phosphorescence that crawled along the murals. It was as if the walls themselves breathed, exhaling long-forgotten memories and whispers of those who had tread these sacred stones before us. My fingers trembled as they grazed the doorframe, a fine tremor of unease seeping into my bones. Ava's quick, sharp murmurs drifted through the chamber in dead languages, a stream of half-formed thoughts fluttering like trapped moths in the encroaching dark. Each word, imbued with an otherworldly weight, both fascinated and terrified me as I pondered her intent. It was in her gaze that I saw the interplay of dread and obsession, a fraying thread on the verge of snapping. Suddenly, a discordant hum pierced the silence, and with it came a flash of shifting shadows that danced in the corner of my eye. The moment felt surreal, a taunt from the dark abyss awakening at our intrusion. Professor Jake's voice, clipped with apprehension, broke through my reverie, muttering, "It's not just a door, it's a gateway." His skepticism wavered momentarily, an echo of something primal gnawing at the edges of his reason. Yet, he could not deny the shifting tides that swept through the air, threatening to envelop us in their chilling embrace. We stood on the precipice, at the juncture of past and present, souls entwined in a web of our own making. The room seemed to pulse with ancient energy, drawing us in with an unrelenting pull, and I felt it, the urge to unravel the very mysteries that lay within. The moment we crossed the threshold, the chamber transformed into a maelstrom of chaos, once still air now rippling with distorted forms, shards of light weaving through the oppressive darkness, coaxing dread from the very fabric of our souls. I stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat, as abstract shapes twisted and flickered on the walls, their movements both mesmerizing and utterly terrifying. My mind raced to comprehend the surrealness before me, yet every effort fell flat against the sheer weight of the ancient curse awakening around us. Liam was at my side, his expression twisted in a rigid mask of horror as he confronted the chaos, but before I could reach out, No's strong hands gripped my shoulders, pulling me away from an archway that threatened to collapse under the strain of otherworldly forces. My heart thudded in my chest as I felt the panic rising within me, a wave of fear crashing against the confines of my reason. "We need to regroup," Noah called, urgency lacing his voice as the flickering lights threatened to swallow us whole. Ava surged ahead, her determination contrasting sharply with the chaos unfolding around her. She moved with purpose, darting towards an ancient inscription panel. Her fingers danced over fading glyphs, brushing against their contours, her mind evidently racing to make sense of this cacophony of sensations. She murmured in dead languages, each word tumbling from her lips like a frantic prayer for clarity. It struck me then how obsession had a way of illuminating the shadows we dared not confront. "Focus, Ava," Jake shouted above the dissonance, but the urgency in his voice felt displaced against the frantic energy of the room. He was already feverishly documenting the warped symbols that writhed before him, scribbling feverishly in his journal, even as unsettling sounds crept into his awareness, echoes of unnatural whispers that fluttered like leaves caught in a storm. Here was a scholar so ensnared by his pursuit that he risked succumbing to the very terror he sought to dismiss. "There's a pattern," Ava shouted, her eyes wide as she deciphered the ancient language written in a trembling script. My chest tightened as her face reflected both fear and determination, a juxtaposition I found haunting. The glyphs seemed to pulsate, echoing with her every word as if they were responding to her plea. Yet around us, shadows flared into sharper relief, pressing closer like fingers of the abyss reaching to clutch our souls. In that chaotic swirl of emotions, I felt my heartbeat quicken, each pulse a reminder of the danger lurking just beyond our grasp. We were pilgrims in a realm of dread, shadows playing tricks on our senses, as a monstrous silhouette slid along the far wall, a twisting figure that beckoned us to comprehend our insignificance in the vast tapestry of time. We scrambled for safer ground, adrenaline surging as instinctive survival instincts kicked in, yet I felt the reality of our predicament close around us like a noose. This ancient chamber, alive with the whispers of long-buried sins, offered no refuge. It demanded reckoning, and I found myself yearning for a truth far more elusive than the treasures we sought. As the tendrils of terror enveloped us, I realized that we had awakened something much more powerful than mere symbols. It was the very essence of fear itself, waiting, hungry for us to falter. Chapter 13. Manifestations of Fear. The narrow corridor of Ithara bore the weight of centuries, each crumbling stone whispering tales of glory long past. Dust danced in the feeble light, curling through the air as if reluctant to settle, while shattered murals watched with hollow eyes. I gripped my worn leather journal tightly, the familiar heft both comforting and suffocating, charcoal pencils poised like harbingers of discovery. A fleeting shadow flickered against the wall, and my heart quickened, a sliver of something ancient and arcane rippling just beyond my reach. Shadows morphed under the flickering torchlight, creating outlines that seemed to beckon. I pressed the pencil against the coarse page, the scratch of graphite echoing in the heavy silence as I sketched rapidly, my focus laser-like despite the shifting outlines along the wall. Each stroke unveiled fragments of a truth I barely comprehended, a teasing allure that drew me deeper into the enigma surrounding us. I could feel the pull, an almost seductive whisper urging me to capture every nuance, every glimpse of hidden lore. A few paces ahead, Ava stepped forward, her long, dark hair catching the muted light as she shifted her attention to a faded inscription. The intensity in her blue eyes sparked with determination, betraying an undercurrent of fear as she traced the carvings with trembling fingers. "This is fascinating," she murmured, the words hanging in the air like a solemn incantation. The inscription seemed to pulse beneath her touch, whispering secrets long forgotten. I watched, mesmerized by her fervor, a striking contrast to my own lurking apprehension. Noah, ever practical, shifted beside me. He checked his survival knife and compass with a meticulous eye, the deliberate movements grounding him in the chaotic energy of our surroundings. His sun-bleached hair contrasted sharply with the gloom, but his expression remained unreadable, every bit the pragmatic survivalist ready for whatever lay ahead. I admired his cool detachment, the way he embraced the unknown with guarded skepticism, as though each corner held not a mystery but a potential threat. Meanwhile, Professor Jake adjusted his digital camera, the sleek device out of place in such an ancient setting. His disdain for the unquantifiable seeped from his voice as he muttered, "These symbols are no more than decorative frippery." But even he couldn't hide the urgency in his movements, the need to document each symbol flickering under the dim light of our torch. "Historically speaking, we cannot allow conjecture to guide our findings," he continued, a clipped tone betraying the edge of his patience. A murmur rippled through the corridor, more than mere echoes of our breaths. It felt alive, urging us to delve further. Just as I began to immerse myself in my sketches, the strange silhouettes flickered again, darting at the edges of my vision like the last breath of dying flame. I jolted at their sudden appearance, a chill trailing down my spine, yet there was something strangely inviting about them. It felt as if the corridor itself, a living, breathing entity, was conspiring to reveal its deepest secrets. "Did you see that?" I asked, a knot forming in my throat. A heavy stillness gripped us, as if the very air conspired to muffle my words. Ava's fingers stilled on the inscription, her brows knitting together in thought. "Liam, it might be worth examining." "No, it's nothing," Professor Jake interjected brusquely, waving her off. "Shadows play tricks in such poorly illuminated places." "Perhaps," Noah conceded, his voice cautious, "but we should remain vigilant. It's easy to lose ourselves in shadows." The atmosphere thickened, each character moving with an urgency that belied our attempts at rationality. Their bodies brushed against mine as we shifted, forming a tight cluster against the creeping dread in the air. I could feel our collective heartbeat as the boundaries of reality blurred, a treacherous dance with the unknown unfolding. It felt like the world outside was whispering through the crumbling stones, warning us to tread lightly. As I gazed once more at the journal, lines I had drawn seemed to blur, and for an unsettling moment the sketches appeared alive. A sliver of dread coiled in my gut. Had my obsession with uncovering the past morphed into something more? An insatiable yearning that might awaken darker forces? Each character was caught in their own web of unease, our fates inexplicably tethered together. I scribbled down the last strokes before forcing myself to look up, and in the flickering light, I could see Ava still scrutinizing her inscription, her brow dampened with concentration. Noah stood watchful, ready to deflect any danger that might emerge, while Professor Jake remained oblivious, his focus unyielding on capturing everything that defied his cold logic. The corridor beckoned with ancient promises, but for now I felt only the growing ache of impending revelations, the question hanging in the air: what truths were we unwittingly courting within these cursed stones? The cavernous hall loomed ahead, its arches bowed and crushed as if the weight of centuries bore down in judgment. Ancient relics lay scattered like discarded dreams, echoes of lost civilizations. The air turned heavy, pressing against our chests, constricting breath as shadows danced along the edges of perception. I stepped inside, heart pounding, the oppressive silence swallowing me whole, for here I would meet the darkest echoes of my own obsessions. As I ventured further into the void, a spectral figure began to take shape, shimmering with a familiarity that sent my pulse racing. It mirrored the intricate sketches in my journal, lines I had drawn in a frenzy during our exploration, though now they hovered with an eerie life of their own. I charged forward, hand outstretched, urgency blurring the line between reason and reckless bravery. "Stand down," I shouted, voice reverberating off the stone walls, each syllable weighed with desperation. But the figure remained unyielding, its translucent features swirling like smoke, mocking my quest for meaning in this desolate place. In that moment, I was engulfed by the torment of inadequacy. My obsession had twisted into a bind that threatened to consume me. "I know you. You're nothing but a projection of my failures," I called out, defiance coloring my words. Shadows coiled closer, amplifying the dread within me. Nearby, Ava stood transfixed by a procession of ghostly figures in tattered robes that glided effortlessly past, their wispy forms brushing against the crumbled reliefs. I glimpsed her fingers trembling, flying over an ancient tablet, her voice trembling as she murmured to herself, "Translate, translate this now." Her determination was a desperate spark, flaring against the encroaching shadows. Yet within her fear brewed, fear of failure, of confronting the ancient tongues that had slipped away from memory. "Is this really what you want?" The ethereal voices echoed, a discordant melody. I saw her look falter, caught between the knowledge she craved and the unknown terror looming ahead. What if you unlock something better left untouched? I wanted to reach her, but an invisible barrier sealed us within our separate horrors. Noah's sturdy frame soon caught my eye, as he positioned himself against a swirling mass of sand, gripping his survival knife tightly. The grains danced like phantoms, memories seeping from the depths of his mind, pushing him back into encounters that had once scarred him. "Stay back," he growled, voice low and fierce. But it was his isolation, not the swirling winds, that tormented him most. I could almost see the shifting shadows of past failures floating around him, reminding him of lost comrades, whispered doubts cloaked in the guise of bitter memories. Across the hall, Professor Jake stood alone, his camera aimed at the shadowed ruins, oblivious to the chaotic energies surrounding him. The device became an extension of his fixation, capturing fragments of the unreal, each click underscoring his desperation to extract evidence where none existed. This will prove it," he muttered under his breath, dismissing the threatening silhouettes that beckoned him with silent taunts. A futile wish to turn the metaphysical into the scientific consumed him, yet he too felt the weight of failure press upon him like the dust of ages. The hall seemed to pulse, shadows stretching and contracting with each flicker of light, chaos swirling as the manifestation of our inner fears converged upon us. My own desperation mingled with theirs, a vicious cycle of haunted aspirations and crippling dread, with echoes of despair resounding against the ancient stones. My thoughts spiraled as I struggled against the merging specters of our twisted psyches, each of us entangled in our fears as they overwhelmed the tenuous grip on our sanity. And then the structure shuddered, a quaking reminder of our fragility, as I shouted a warning that fell on deaf ears. With every twist of terror, hope slithered further from our grasp. A rush of panic washed over us, mirroring the chaos of the space that wanted to swallow us whole. In that moment, I could see our paths diverging, each interaction weaving an irrevocable pattern of fate, tethered together by threads of darkened memories. The oppressive atmosphere thickened, swallowing the final vestiges of rationality, leaving us clinging to shreds of courage while fear tightened its grip. As I choked back dread, I realized we were not merely observing horrors, we were entwined in them, subjects to the darker motives that shaped reality in this forsaken place. As the curse unfurled like a malignant bloom, the very stones of the ancient structure trembled, unleashing a cacophony of despair as they threatened to swallow us whole. Panic surged through my veins as I darted behind a fallen column, the familiar weight of my journal, a talisman, clutched to my chest. Dust billowed around us like memories turned hostile, each breath thick with a foreboding sense of finality, as we teetered on the precipice of the unknown. Ava scrambled to my side, her fingers grasping a bundle of salvaged manuscripts, her face a mask of resolve intertwined with dread. Quick glances over her shoulder revealed the shifting shadows that swirled, threatening to consume all that she had striven to understand. "We can't leave them," she cried, breathless yet determined, echoing the hunger for knowledge that haunted us. The manuscripts glimmered dully in the torchlight, whispering the forbidden truths she feared to abandon. "No. We must go," I shouted, urgency driving my words. The sensation of the ground shifting beneath our feet escalated as loose stones began to rain down around us, grating the silence with a thunderous warning. I could feel the shadows lurking, clawing at our resolve, hungry to engulf us in darkness. In this moment, I was torn between my desire to safeguard her discoveries and the imperative of survival pressing against my chest. Noah emerged from the haze, a bastion of pragmatism amidst the growing chaos. "This way." His voice cut through the tumult, steady and resolute, a guiding force against the encroaching chaos. He gestured with clear, deliberate movements, leading us toward a narrow exit passage that seemed to shimmer with a promise of safety. His muscular frame carved a path through the swirling dust, embodying a survival instinct cultivated in the wilds. Behind us, Professor Jake's frantic clicks of his camera punctured the air, capturing fragments of disarray in a last-ditch effort to validate his insatiable ambition. "These findings must be recorded," he yelled, a wild glimmer in his eyes, caught between his obsession for empirical evidence and the harsh truth of our situation. The roar of collapsing stone mingled with his mutterings, his conflict encapsulated in every frantic motion, a scholar unraveling in the face of chaos. Then the ground shuddered violently, sending us tumbling against one another, the structure groaning like a wounded beast, a cacophony of despair ringing in our ears. Liam, clutching his journal, dove behind a fallen column, feeling it shift under him. Each heart-stopping moment blurred as I leapt to my feet, guiding Ava to follow, knowing the manuscripts she clung to might tether her to the dark whispers of the hall. The dust cloud thickened, particles biting into our lungs as we surged toward the passage Noah had indicated. Behind us, stones tumbled like misfortunes falling into the abyss, each clang of the crashing stone fueling the sense of impending doom. I glanced back to see Professor Jake, unwilling to part from his evidence, caught in the shifting shadows as a sudden surge of stones fell, a reckoning for his unfathomable ambition. "No, Professor," I shouted, dread coiling in my gut, but time snapped away like a frail thread. Ava's eyes locked onto the vision of his plight, horror mixing with urgency, as she too struggled against the instinct to turn back. "We must go, Ava." I grabbed her arm, forcing her forward with a fierce determination that felt at odds with my own fears. As we surged ahead, the passage loomed close, but the shuddering structure threatened to collapse our chances of escape. I could feel the malignant presence encroaching as I pushed onward, dragging her along. Together, we burst through the narrowing passage, the dim light flickering at the other end like a dying flame. Noah held it open, gesturing frantically for us to hurry while the ground behind us collapsed into itself. Just as the edge of my journal slipped from my grip, an immense tremor split the air, the world blurred into chaos. In that last instant of desperate hope, I caught one final glimpse of Professor Jake, captured, still pointing his camera as the shadows roared. There was an unsettling sense that the very forces we had sought to unearth were far greater than our understanding. They swallowed his cries, leaving only silence as we dove through the exit. The door slammed behind us with a finality that echoed like a tomb sealing shut. We stood there, bathed in flickering light from the hallway, breathless, trembling, with the bitter taste of escape bitter on our tongues. Yet I knew, somewhere within the recesses of my mind, that we had not truly escaped. The burden of curiosity would haunt us, entwining our fates like shadows trailing the unwary, each moment carved by a lingering dread that what had followed us into the light would one day come to claim us once again. Chapter 14. The Ancient Incantation. In the decaying heart of the ancient courtyard, I felt the weight of centuries pressing against the stones. As I traced the symbols with a trembling finger, dust motes swirled in the filtered light, each speck a reminder of the secrets buried beneath the rubble. Ava's voice cut through the silence, her mutterings forming a counterpoint to my incantation, reverberating off the fractured walls that had once known the life and laughter of those long gone. The stones, worn and weary, crumbled under my touch as I focused on the arcane script, each stroke pulsed with significance, a vibration that resonated deep within my marrow. I could hear the faint echo of time itself, the whispers of ancient lives, the reverberations of their actions etching themselves into this now desolate space. The air hung thick with anticipation and dread, a delicate balance I couldn't quite navigate. "Keep reading," Ava instructed, her voice clear and measured, yet laced with an underlying urgency. She leaned over a battered manuscript, fingers tracing the worn pages as if they held the key to unfathomable truths. The soft cadence of her words mingled with my own, creating a tapestry of sounds that swelled against the decaying walls, each syllable reverberating in the emptiness. My heart quickened, each incantation binding me closer to the ancient power we sought. With every syllable I recited, I felt the atmosphere shift around us. The dust motes glimmered like distant stars caught in a fog, and for a fleeting moment, I imagined a world alive and vibrant before it fell silent. As I spoke the words steeped in lost history, the very stones responded. A low groan rippled through the courtyard, a protest from the earth that once supported the magnificence of civilization. But then from the periphery came a sound, a fractured cry, wild and warning. "Liam! Ava! Look out!" No's voice surged through the tumult, sharp and clear, slicing through the incantation like a knife. I turned instinctively, fear knotting in my stomach. A slab, dislodged from its weary resting place, began to fracture, threatening to cascade down upon us. The distant rumble echoed our rising panic, a sinister counterpoint to the vibrancy of our chanting. The air, thick with tension, stifled my breath as I glanced back at Ava. Her intensity was unbroken. She was still focused on the manuscript, lost in the delicate rhythms of her forgotten tongue, even as danger loomed overhead. Noah was a figure of certainty against the chaotic backdrop, moving swiftly to secure our escape route. The shifting weight of the structure resonated ominously, echoing the dissonance of our ambitions and desires. He thrust a hand toward me, a silent command born of urgency, though even his pragmatism couldn't chase away the looming dread. "Get back," he urged, words sharper than the stone crumbling around us. The roar of dust-filled winds swirled, and I knew then that we stood at the precipice, poised to unlock a gateway to the unknown, the fragile threads of our fate intertwining with every syllable uttered in the sacred tongue. I felt the pulse of the courtyard thrum beneath me, as if it possessed a heartbeat of its own. I tore my gaze from Ava, leaving the incantation suspended in the air as I stumbled back toward Noah, dread climbing my throat like a poison ivy vine. The architecture around us trembled, and my heart raced faster than my thoughts could keep pace. Behind me, Ava's mutterings grew fainter, her concentration unbroken by the impending doom. I could hear the last words echoing in my mind, a strange echo weaving through the chaos, the desperate hope that we weren't simply tempting fate, but stirring something that had long been buried. As the ground shook, sending small clouds of dust up around us, I cast one last glance at the trembling wall adorned with ancient symbols, a testament to human ambition mingled with the inevitability of decay. Ava still leaned over the manuscript, her features etched with determination, caught in a moment that might very well consume us all. Together, we danced on the knife's edge of discovery and disaster, the remnants of the past threatening to consume us as we reached for what might remain. But just as quickly as the wave of dread rose, it twisted into a frantic urgency. My hand darted, grabbing for the arm of my steadfast companion. "We have to go," I urged, pulling her away from the murmurs of the ancient texts that whispered seductively of power just out of reach. Ava's sharp blue eyes met mine, an intense gaze framed by shadows. I could see the decision being made, the weight of our mutual obsessions hanging precariously. The decision weighed heavy in the air, a ticking clock, and we knew, sometimes the path of knowledge is riddled with danger, and sometimes ignorance is a far safer route. Yet even as I pulled her away, I felt the draw of the unknown whispering against the fading light, leaving an imprint in my mind that refused to fade, even as we fled the crumbling structure around us. It would not be the last time we would confront the ghosts of history and the perils they held. Not by a long shot. The passage ahead yawned like a gaping maw, beckoning us into its depths with an allure of ancient secrets tangled with peril. Noah, resolute in his approach, stepped lightly over the debris that littered the ground, a steadfast guide in a crumbling world that threatened to consume us with every cautious step. The air was thick with the scent of damp stone and scorched earth, a mixture that clung to my lungs like a promise of disaster. As we moved deeper, the walls pressed closer, the narrowing confines becoming an echo chamber of our anxieties and unspoken fears. I could hear the distant clatter of stones shifting, each sound accentuating the uncertainty surrounding us, a palpable weight that bore down on our shoulders. My thoughts drifted, tracing the jagged lines on the walls, a history written in stone, remnants of a civilization that had long succumbed to the passage of time. I glanced sideways at Ava. Her sharp blue eyes flickered over the inscriptions and the ancient patterns worn smooth by centuries. A glance of quiet yearning and apprehension mixed within her, betraying her desire to unravel the tales of this forsaken passage even as danger lay thick in the air. "Watch your footing," Noah cautioned, his voice low and steady. His weathered hands, calloused from years in the wild, moved confidently over the ground, navigating the unseen pitfalls with an ease I found admirable yet daunting. He pointed the way, signaling the best paths around the fallen debris, scattered stones that whispered of neglect and decay, remnants of a bygone age. A soft crackle sounded above us, as the wind seemed to sigh through the gap where the stone had collapsed. The sound reverberated ominously, painting shadows across our path. Each crunch of gravel beneath our feet amplified my unease. Each step felt weighed down by the specters of those who once roamed this sacred space. I exchanged a quick glance with Noah, whose expression was implacable, yet I felt the urgency brewing beneath the surface, a careful wariness that urged us to move with haste. Ava murmured something under her breath. An incantation? Or perhaps the language of the ancients she so revered, enmeshing us in a web of history that threatened to entrap us. It was both beautiful and reckless, her devotion spilling over like a fragile cup at the brink of overflowing. "Noah," I said, my voice cutting through the thrum of my racing heart, "shouldn't we proceed with more caution? The structure seems unsteady." He shot me a look, fierce and resolute, his jaw set tightly. "You think I don't know that? We have to keep moving. There's no turning back now." His voice carried an authority I couldn't ignore, though something in my gut warned me that haste could unravel us further. The passage twisted and narrowed, and I felt the ancient stones breathing down my neck, their essence choking the space we occupied. Light filtered through cracks above, creating shafts that illuminated the thick dust swirling around us, and I caught glimpses of engravings that vanished beneath the shroud of decay. They held stories of gods and warriors, of triumphs and tribulations long forgotten, but they were fading even as I tried to absorb them. "There goes our window," Ava whispered, her expression morphing into one of alarm. I followed her gaze and saw a widening fissure at the end of the passage, the jagged stones crumbling under unseen pressure, cascading down into a yawning gap. The thought of being trapped, ensnared by a collapse of time and stone, gripped my chest with icy fingers. Noah stiffened, his posture firming as he assessed the situation, the rugged digital compass in his hand steady even as the ground beneath us seemed to tremble. "Move carefully," he commanded, motioning us to follow, as he stepped over the yawning gap with the precise grace of someone who had traversed many treacherous paths before. Each movement was a delicate ballet, our bodies adjusting to the confines of the space, inching forward while the walls pressed in on us, threatening to crush any lingering breath of hope. I dared not look back. The shadows behind felt like hungry phantoms poised to consume what little light we carried with us. "I don't like this," I muttered, catching Noah's eye again. "We could be courting disaster. Or we could be uncovering history," he countered, his voice holding the weight of conviction. Behind him, Ava remained silent, the flames of her fascination flickering beneath her composed exterior. As we maneuvered past the yawning chasm, my heart raced in rhythm with the crunch of gravel underfoot. I could feel the pressing silence, the heaviness of impending calamity blending with the very fabric of the ancient passage. The air whispered secrets, fragments of time flitting through like wayward spirits searching for liberation. We emerged momentarily into a small alcove, a fleeting reprieve from the tightening passage, but even here I could feel the dread cling to us, heavy and oppressive. The light shone upon fractured tiles, remnants of the mosaic artistry that had once graced the spaces above, now rendered lifeless under a veneer of dust and neglect. As Noah studied the path ahead, I shifted my gaze toward Ava, whose brow was furrowed in contemplation, a plethora of thoughts bubbling beneath her polished demeanor. "This isn't just a way out," she observed quietly, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the patterns etched into the remaining tiles. "We're walking into a tomb, a marker of the end. Can't you feel it?" The atmosphere thickened around us, and I glimpsed a flicker of unease pass through Noah, the uncertainty palpable despite his determined facade. I knew we were each grappling with our thoughts, haunted by the presence of the past that refused to let go even as we sought to unveil its secrets. As we pressed onward, the impending collapse loomed larger, our steps echoing the silent fears clamoring to escape. But as we braced ourselves against the growing uncertainty, I couldn't help but wonder if this pursuit of knowledge was worth the cost of our very lives, a question that danced on the edge of my consciousness, ever looming, ever haunting. Jake isolated himself from the thrumming chaos, a solitary figure, ascending the broken steps leading to a dim chamber. The air hung thick with ancient secrets, curling like the shadows around him, promising peril and power entwined. He seemed impervious to the shifting reality around him. The rumble of collapsing stone, nothing more than an echo in the recesses of his mind, preoccupied by an obsession I couldn't fully understand. With every careful movement, he scaled the half-collapsed steps, their jagged edges demanding the utmost concentration. I watched from the dim light of the passage, every flickering beam casting shadows that seemed to dance mockingly around him. "I have to get it," he declared over his shoulder, as though I had questioned his intent. My stomach churned, twisted by an instinctual wariness. The chamber was an unsettling spectacle, illuminated by a faint, eerie green glow that pulsed rhythmically, as if alive, breathing in the darkness. Dust filled the air like sorrowful whispers, coiling around the shattered remnants of the past. It felt as though the very essence of the chamber was saturated with memories, suffocating in their intensity, whispering warnings of the hubris of man. Jake reached the threshold of the chamber, steadied himself on jagged stone ledges that crumbled under his touch. His fingers brushed against the walls, tracing the ancient symbols that writhed beneath his fingertips, alive with unuttered histories. My heart raced as I took a step forward, straining to catch sight of the small carved idol that lay nestled upon an ancient pedestal, a figure that beckoned him closer even as the shadows whispered dire tales of consequence. He hovered over it like a moth drawn to an all-consuming flame, the carved idol grotesquely beautiful, its intricate runes flickering ominously under his touch. Each line seemed to tell a story steeped in dread, a celebration and curse entwined within the craftsmanship that had endured through millennia, surviving the decay that surrounded it. I could hear his breath, harsh and rasping against the stillness, punctuating the tension that filled the chamber. "Return quickly, Jake," I called out, my voice steady, yet laced with an edge of desperation. I was painfully aware of the tremors beginning to vibrate beneath my feet, the sound of distant rumbling underscoring the heartbeat of the artifact, urgent and hungry. Each pulse echoed a response to his approach, a warning that resonated with every errant breath. He paid me no mind, caught in the thrall of discovery, lifting the idol to the light. A sheen of sweat broke out across his brow, reflecting the depths of his fixation. I stood on the precipice of anxiety and fascination, watching the delicate dance of his choices unfold. Was he driven by academic ambition, or had something more primal gripped him, a longing for connection to what lay buried beneath the weight of the centuries? But as the tremors escalated, rippling through the stone, the walls of the chamber began to respond, a warning they had given before, now swirling to life in a crescendo of urgency. The soft hum of the artifact grew louder, blending with the haunting wail of the shifting masonry. I felt the air thicken, a heavy blanket of dread descending upon us all. "Jake, you need to?" My words faltered as a sharp crack rang out, reverberating around us. It was no longer an abstract concern, but a visceral reminder that we were not alone in this place. I stepped forward, the instinct to protect growing more urgent, the desire to shake him from his obsession tightening my chest. His fingers lingered over the idol's surface, suspended between the desire for knowledge and the threat looming all around us. "Just a moment longer," he insisted, almost dreamily, as if he could tame the chaos with mere determination. Time stretched, elongating like shadows in the dim glow. Every second felt stretched and torn as the chamber trembled. A heavy dust cloud fell, swirling around us as stone and earth protested under the weight of the present, crashing into the echoes of the past. The walls began to close in, the green glow pulsing almost in sync with the quaking stone. "Jake." My shout was now frantic, reverberating off the walls like a desperate prayer. I could feel the tightness in my chest deepen, the guilt of allowing him to pursue this obsession gnawing at my conscience. What had we unearthed in this forsaken chamber? And what consequences would we now reap for our insatiable curiosity? Finally, as the tremors escalated, Jake's resolve wavered. He glanced back, caught between his desire and the echoes of our impending doom, a flicker of doubt crossing his features. "I can't leave it behind," he murmured, his voice barely rising above the sound of crumbling stone, and I felt the cold dread in the pit of my stomach churning like a warning bell. "Jake, it's going to collapse." I was shouting now, the urgency rising as panic took hold. "It's not worth your life." The words slipped from my lips, raw and urgent, a plea for reason against the backdrop of growing chaos. He hesitated, just a moment, a heartbeat caught in the grasp of choices. I could see the struggle on his face, the pull between his ambition and the very real danger we faced. It was a clash not merely of desires, but of the very essence of who we were, what we stood for in this pursuit of knowledge at any cost. With a final tremor, the chamber gave a mighty groan, an ominous farewell as the walls shook in violent protest. Jake's expression shifted, panic dawning on him like the heavy fog that rolled in on an unforgiving night. "Take it or let it go." The shout slipped out, sharper than I intended, echoing against the chaotic sounds of impending ruin. In that moment, I realized the reality of our pursuit. The echoes of the past could just as easily lead us to salvation as they could to our end, entwined in the shadows that danced on the edges of existence. And with each breath I took, I knew we were racing against the ghosts of history. The question was who would triumph in the end. The walls trembled again, violently, and the idol shivered under his grip. He dropped it. The sound of it crashing to the floor sent echoes cascading through the chamber, a sound that was both final and liberating, a poignant acknowledgement that sometimes letting go is the bravest act of all. And as we stumbled backward, grasping at what light remained in the fading green glow, I knew we were each haunted by our desires, by our obsessions, but perhaps there were moments where clarity could arise from darkness. Moments that held the potential to unlock new paths forward amid the ruins. As the tremors resided into an unsettling stillness, I realized that our journey was far from over, entangled in the shadows of the unknown, a constant reminder that the whispers of history would always seek to draw us closer, even as we desperately searched for a way back to the light. Chapter 15: The Final Stand. I stood amid the crumbling stone chamber, the air thick with the weight of secrets long buried, my leather journal warm in my grip. Each fractured mosaic tile and worn symbol etched into the weathered columns whispered of forgotten rites, a symphony of despair that clamored beneath the surface waiting to be unleashed. As I positioned myself before the ancient stone altar, I felt the ancient relics pull, an urgent tug toward truths that could ensnare both heart and mind. My heart quickened as I laid out the weathered artifacts in precise order, their surfaces slick with the dust of ages. The chamber seemed to breathe with me, an echo of its own breath stirring against the silent stones. I caught a glimpse of Ava as she unrolled a faded parchment, her fingers steady yet anxious, revealing the labyrinth of ancient text that promised to unlock the mysteries we had sought. Her voice, clear and determined, sliced through the stagnant air, rising as if the very stones were straining to hear her words. "Omnis lugere abstrusum non vices," she began, the cadence of the incantation wrapping around the room like a shroud, unsettling yet mesmerizing. Noah moved in the shadows near the shattered window, methodically checking his survival gear. I saw the way his muscles coiled in readiness, a finely tuned machine, aware of the dangers that lay just beyond our fragile sanctuary. The dim light caught in his sun-bleached hair, and he kept his eyes trained on the darkness, every instinct honed by years in the wilderness. There was a tangible tension in his posture, a readiness that belied the uncertainty that hung heavily in the air. Professor Jake Hastings stood a few steps ahead of me, holding an ornate, heavy artifact that gleamed with an unsettling luster. His glasses perched precariously on the bridge of his nose. He adjusted them with deliberate precision, as though they could sharpen his skeptical gaze and pierce the layers of superstition. Historically speaking, these superstitions often mask the mundane, he intoned dismissively, his voice tinged with the arrogance of his empirical mind. Yet, even as he uttered those words, I noticed the way his grip tightened, revealing a crack in his stoic facade, betraying a fleeting fear that contradicted his bravado. "Keep your focus, everyone," Jake commanded, though his authority rang hollow amidst the murmurs of the incantation. Each syllable Ava spoke grew more powerful, an undercurrent that seemed to weave through our tense tableau, binding us closer while pushing the shadows further from reach. The chamber around us seemed to exhale, its ancient breath stirring the dust that floated in the faint light filtering through cracks in the stone. I could feel the whispers beneath the surface, secrets coiling and shifting like restless spirits eager to break free. My pulse thrummed with uncertainty. Each relic carried with it the weight of countless lost souls, and I was painfully aware that in our quest for knowledge we were no longer mere observers but participants in something greater and far more dangerous than ourselves. As I gazed at Ava, her blue eyes shone with a fervor that lit the corners of my mind. With each word she uttered, the shadows seemed to deepen, thickening around us like a mist eager to suffocate. I leaned closer to my relics, willing them to offer guidance, clarity, anything to anchor my racing thoughts against the swell of darkness looming just outside our fragile reality. The weight of the chamber bore down on me, but the urgency pulsed stronger. The very fabric of our existence began to unravel as she drew nearer to the ritual's crux, our fates entwined in the ancient rhythm echoing within those haunted walls. Time slipped, an endless expanse of anticipation, as I awaited the moment when our collective actions would spiral into the unknown, the reverberations sending chills down my spine. And yet, beneath the anticipation, a whisper in my mind warned me that not all secrets should be unearthed. Some truths belonged to the abyss. The stillness shattered as darkness spilled into the chamber like an ill omen, curling through the air and twisting at the edges of reality. The sound of broken stones whispered of long-forgotten nightmares, as if the very walls recoiled from the horrors they once contained. In that moment, the atmosphere shifted from dread to desperation, an electric charge crackling at the precipice of chaos. Noah acted instinctively, hefting the metal pipe as the first grotesque figure clawed its way through the broken archway. Shadows seemed to cascade behind it, an extension of something far darker. His body surged into action, driven by an urgency to protect what little ground we had. With a force born from sheer will, he swung the pipe toward the looming horror, the metal glinting as it caught the faint light. The impact felt like striking stone, an unsettling thud that resonated deep within me, reverberating through the ancient walls. The figure staggered but did not fall, and I saw the fear flicker in Noah's eyes, momentarily replaced by determination. "Get back!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the cacophony, the urgency in his tone palpable as he fought against the encroaching darkness. In that suffocating moment, I raised my arms toward the crumbling ceiling, feeling the remnants of the relics within me. "We need to focus." My voice emerged with conviction, battling against the desperation clawing at my throat. I channeled the energy, the reverberation of my incantation mingling with Ava's words, weaving a fragile thread against the creeping horror. "Patrim tenebrarum submantis luminus," Ava continued, her voice steady but strained as the walls rattled with the fury of the encroaching entities. Each word felt like a desperate attempt to bind the darkness, to keep it from engulfing us. I could see her eyes, fierce and wide, carrying the burden of our fates, a weight only she could bear in that moment. As the wretched shapes writhed and advanced, their forms morphed into nightmarish silhouettes. Each step towards us echoed with a groan that burrowed into my bones. More, I urged, my heart pounding in a frantic rhythm that threatened to drown out her voice. The air crackled with raw energy as I intoned the next segment of our chant, an uneasy amalgamation of our fears and hopes that hung like a thread barely holding us together. Professor Jake, clutching his artifact tightly, struggled with his disbelief. He scribbled in his journal, his pen scratching against the paper, in a frenzied attempt to record the unexplainable, to capture the essence of the impossibility unfolding before us. No. You can't document this, I shouted at him, my frustration flaring like the darkness surrounding us. You need to help. Yet even as I spoke, a sliver of doubt carved itself into my resolve. Could empirical understanding conquer the visceral horror spilling into our world? Each horrifying creature that took form only served to mock Jake's rigid belief. His voice turned clipped as he faced the twisted shapes with defiance. Historically speaking, this is impossible, he breathed, but the tremor in his tone told me he was losing the fight against his own fear. Keep your formation now, he shouted, the commanding tone slipping into sheer desperation as he gripped his artifact, attempting to channel whatever power it possessed against the nightmare unfolding. It felt as if the weight of all our past choices converged within that chamber, caught in the heart of chaos we had unwittingly awakened. The fabric of our reality felt stretched thin as shadows clawed at the edges of our collective consciousness. The clattering of stone echoed with every crash of confusion, every snap of instinct, the momentum of our lives pushing us into the depths of despair. I turned to Noah, my gaze searching for the familiarity of our shared mission, a silent agreement hovering between us in the terror. Ava's incantation wove through the chaos, each syllable resonating like a heartbeat, drawing strength from the core of the ancient relics. The clash grew louder, deafening, as the darkness swirled, attempting to absorb our very essence. My breath quickened, frantically rising and falling, lost in the tempest of uncertainty. As we stood on the precipice of our decisions, the shadows tightened their grip, pulsating like the tide, threatening to drag us all beneath the surface into a realm from which there would be no return. The chamber throbbed with an energy both ancient and relentless, as I held the pulsing relic high, its glow casting eerie light across our determined faces. I could feel the weight of their gazes, the fraying threads of our fate converging in that single moment as we stood on the cusp of the unknown, hearts aligned yet minds fraught with doubt. It felt like the eye of a storm, chaos swirling just beyond our reach as I channeled everything I had into that flickering light, desperate for the truth it promised. Ava pressed the parchment against her chest, her blue eyes locked on mine, as the cadence of her incantation became an unyielding pulse against the rising tide of darkness. Auxilia ascendir, effligentis celerima, she intoned, the words swirling with the breath of ages, each syllable punctuated by the clatter of distant debris that reverberated against the walls like the tolling of a funeral bell. I saw the tremor of her lips, felt her unwavering resolve wavering as the shadows deepened around us, threatening to swallow her whole. Noah had positioned himself protectively between the group and the encroaching darkness, his body coiled like a tightly wound spring. The metallic pipe was an extension of his will, a weapon against the onslaught that sought to overwhelm us. His alert eyes darted between the figures, surging forward, and the light of our pulsing relic, every instinct demanding action as he gripped it tighter. "Don't let it breach the center," he shouted, his voice a lifeline tethering us together in that cacophony of dread. But it was Professor Jake who wavered. Visible strain etched into his face, the artifact clutched like a talisman against an encroaching void. His skepticism, once an anchor, became a burden as he faced the growing rift between his beliefs and the impending reality. For a fleeting moment, I saw understanding flicker across his features, realization dawning like a dim light breaking through the dark, and it paralyzed him. "We have one shot, decide now," he shouted, the urgency in his voice fracturing the resolve we had fought so hard to maintain. In that heartbeat, time hung suspended, hands outstretched toward the relic, our locked eyes searching for meaning amid the swirling chaos. The energy in the room surged, electric and intoxicating, lifting my heart even as the dread wrapped around it like a noose. The air grew thick with potential, an invitation to forge our destiny amidst the yawning abyss. Ava's voice soared above the clamor, merging with the luminous aura of the relic, each word resonating within the stone. Her gaze anchored me, grounding my determination against the unfathomable darkness threatening to pull us apart. I felt the truth of our fates knitting together, intertwined by the consequences of our decisions. To harness this force could mean salvation or our undoing. With a surge of adrenaline, we crossed the threshold into the moment, the precipice of revelation illuminating the chamber with a blinding light. The relic pulsed in unison with our beating hearts, and we unleashed the energy contained within its ancient form, flinging wide the gates of unknown dimensions. The shriek of the dark entities filled the chamber, a cacophony of despair that reverberated through stone, bone, and soul. Everything shifted as the energy exploded outward, wrapping around us in a whirlwind of light and sound, blinding me to all but the moment, a furious blend of fear and hope, chaos and determination. In the heart of that unrelenting storm, we stood together, bound by our past sins, tangled in our desires, united in a fight for our survival. And then the world around us folded inward, a kaleidoscope of shifting shadows and brilliant light. I could hear their cries, the haunting whispers of the shadows colliding with our pleas for salvation, but we remained, an indomitable force against the void, an echo of ancient souls reclaiming their own. What lay beyond that moment, I could not fathom. All I knew was the pulse of our combined will beating fiercely against the darkness, a hope forged in defiance that promised to linger long after the shadows had receded. Chapter 16. Escape from Ithara. The air felt thick, suffocating, as I stumbled down the narrow corridor of Ithara's ruins, clutching my leather journal against my chest. Dust swirled like spectral hands reaching for me, while the distant ominous rumble of crumbling masonry whispered a relentless reminder of time's decay. My heart raced, sinking with the echo of crumbling stones. We were not just fleeing. Every jagged rock and scattered shadow seemed to reach out with the promise of retribution for our trespasses. "Noah, we can't stop," I shouted, the words rasping as dust clogged my throat. But his grip on my arm tightened, fingers digging in, each command more insistent than the last. "Keep moving." His voice was a steady anchor amid the chaos, a beacon pulling me forward. To my right, Ava pushed through the choking dust with a battered bag slung over her shoulder, its straps straining against the weight of artifacts we had salvaged, priceless remnants of a forgotten world. I could see the determination in her stride, even as the dust clouded her striking blue eyes, masking the fear flickering beneath her fierce facade. She was more than a linguist. She embodied the very pulse of ancient history, and I could feel that she understood our urgency far too well. "Clear that." The frustration in Professor Jake's voice cut through the murky air as he shoved at a shelf that had toppled from above, ancient relics spilling like lost memories. The weight of his ambition pressed down on me. How could he remain fixated on control while the world disintegrated around us? He scrambled with the urgency of a man accustomed to order, his voice sharp with authority, yet I could see the tremor in his hands. We darted forward, and with every step I could feel the corridor tremble beneath the weight of Ithara's burdened history. The sporadic light filtering through the cracks illuminated jagged walls and splintered columns, revealing the grotesque decay lurking in the depths of this ancient cataclysm. A clatter of stone startled me, sending a bolt of adrenaline through my veins. The corridor seemed to breathe, inhale and exhale dust, every thud of falling debris quickening our frantic pace. I glanced at the journal in my hands, the sketches within trembling with the reality of what we faced, an echo of our own transgressions. With each resounding crash, my heart synced with the ominous pulse of a city long lost. Go. No's sharp command came again, a mantra urging me forward. I willed my legs to move, past crumbling doorways and festering shadows that seemed to taunt us with their twisted geometry. Behind us, the shadows danced, and with each resounding thump of a collapsing wall, I felt the weight of my sins, a reminder that curiosity could lead to ruin. Liam! Ava's voice called out, a thread of urgency woven through her tone. She leapt over fallen debris, deftly avoiding jagged edges that threatened to seize her foot, her focus unwavering as she grasped a fragile manuscript, brushing the remnants of dust from its surface before tucking it safely within her bag. A sudden roar of crumbling stone sent a tremor through the air, rattling our bones. A large section of the ceiling sagged and fell, chunks of masonry cascading around us in a chaotic symphony. I felt my pulse quicken, every nerve ending alight with the primal need to escape. Run! I shouted, my breath escaping in ragged gasps as we surged forward, our desperate need for survival binding us closer. In a dizzying moment, time seemed to fracture. The cacophony of our footfalls pounded against the stone like a heart racing towards its own demise. As I cast one last glance at the shadows entwined within the dust, I saw the ghostly form of Ithara collapsing, history caving in upon itself. I had come seeking answers, yet the city's haunting whispers reminded me of the fragility of knowledge. We pushed deeper into the chaos, an irrevocable knot tying us to our fate. With an urgent prayer to whatever ancient powers remained, we bolted past crumbling edges, drawing closer to an unknown sanctuary beyond. The weight of the journal in my grip felt less like a burden now, its pages a bridge between what we had sought and what would become of us. Together we stepped into the darkness, searching for salvation amid the ruin, while the dust whispered forgotten tales of despair. We stumbled into the passageway, the walls shifting and curling, as if the very structure of Ithara sought to disorient us. Shadows writhed along the walls, stretching into contorted forms that seemed to breathe with a sinister life of their own. The ground felt less like solid earth and more like an uncertain wave beneath our feet, the angle of descent turning every step into an act of treachery. "Stay close," Noah instructed, his voice steady yet underlined with a note of urgency. He held a tattered map in one hand, his fingers pressing against the parchment, seeking guidance among the chaos. Each bend in the corridor left me uneasy, a disquiet weaving through the fabric of my being. He was our compass, the beacon of experience in this twisted nightmare. To my right, Ava moved with an eerie grace, her expression carved from stone as she sidestepped jagged debris. She held tightly to her bundle of salvaged texts, but her eyes flickered with a different obsession as she brushed her fingers along the fractured column. It was as if she sought something hidden there, a memory, a whisper in a forgotten language. "This inscription," she muttered, a soft cadence slipping from her lips, the strange syllables curling like smoke into the air. It seemed a desperate attempt to cling to understanding as the past unraveled around us. "Do you think we should?" I started, but Jake's voice, clipped and impatient, cut through the uncertainty. "Focus on what's in front of you," he barked, his frustration spilling into the air like a sharp mist. He darted ahead, already trying to navigate the crumbling mess before him, pushing at remnants that dared block our escape. The professor had always dismissed the stories, the legends, reducing Ithara's intricacies to mere artifacts. Yet now, amid collapsing stone, his skepticism felt like a futile shield against reality. "Look at these walls," I murmured, eyes darting between the inscriptions and my journal, frantically sketching every fragmented symbol. The architecture wavered, each cracked surface echoing their burdens, whispering of ancient sins and lost knowledge. The shadows loomed like unseen entities, and I could feel them pressing closer, the weight of centuries closing in around us. My heart raced, pacing with the thrum of our hurried footfalls. We pressed deeper into the dark, the passage twisting into surreal shapes that played tricks on my mind. A low rumble vibrated through the floor, a warning from the depths of Ithara, a telling that this place had begun to reclaim what was its. "We have to pick up the pace," Noah urged, his instincts honed from years of survival, the urgency lining his voice igniting a spark of fear within me. With each step, the ground trembled, rocks shifting beneath our feet, as the very architecture groaned. A flash of light from above revealed fractures in the stone, illuminating the aged cryptic symbols woven throughout. The shifting shadows cast familiar shapes, warning ghosts dancing just out of reach, as if time itself wished to remind us of our impending doom. "Ava, watch out!" I gasped, but the warning was too late. Her foot slipped on a jagged edge, and she stumbled, clutching at a nearby column for balance. For a moment, I saw the pulse of vulnerability in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty amidst her fervent facade. "Careful!" No's voice thundered through the tight confines, urging us to maintain focus. With renewed resolve, we pressed on, feeling the disquiet of the passage squeezing tighter around us. In a dizzying swirl of disorienting turns, we moved faster, urgency becoming the lifeblood of our escape, propelling us away from collapse. I could sense the walls warping with an otherworldly intent, as if the very architecture reveled in our plight. Then came a deafening crack. It echoed through the twisted corridor, shuddering through my core, a final harbinger that the walls, already beleaguered, were about to give way. We stumbled forward, adrenaline coursing through our veins, hearts racing in unison with the chaos. "Go! Move!" No's command reverberated, but there was no need for his urgency to remind me. I felt it pulsating in the depths of my soul. We dashed forward, away from the newly awakened terror looming behind us, deeper into the labyrinth that entwined our fates. The passage curved unexpectedly into a dim alcove, and we tumbled inside, the flicker of light retreating into the encroaching shadows. My breath came in ragged gasps, and in the sudden stillness I felt the weight of the world pressing down on us. A moment, I wheezed, clinging to the remnants of hope. The walls seemed to close in, but for now we had found a fragile refuge, an island amid the storms of the unknown. We burst into the courtyard, the shifting chaos of Ithara momentarily giving way to an open space. The shadow veil shimmered before us, an ethereal glow cutting through the dim twilight, beckoning with the allure of salvation, yet steeped in the weight of uncertainty. Dust settled like fallen stars around us, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I could reach out and grasp the essence of hope that fluttered just out of reach. "Over here!" No's voice rang clear as he halted beside a partially intact archway. He waved us closer, a gesture of leadership amid the collapsing world. We gathered in a tight line, the collective desperation palpable in the air, as he steadied himself on uneven cracked stone, glancing at each of us with fervent urgency. Ava's eyes widened as she clutched her artifacts close, a warrior's burden that echoed the weight of history itself. For all her independence, I could see how fragile she felt at this moment. The pulsing veil seemed both an invitation and a threat. "Is it safe?" she asked, voice taut, her heartbeat a wild rhythm against the hushed ambiance of the courtyard. "Should we be taking that chance?" Professor Jake interjected, brows furrowed, as he lifted the glowing artifact high. The orb radiated a flickering light, illuminating the despair etched across his features. This might be a portal or a trap. We must proceed with caution." Yet even as he spoke, I could sense the thrill of discovery beneath his scientific skepticism. It sang a haunting melody of curiosity against the cacophony of chaos around us. My heart raced with the swelling tide of uncertainty and wonder. The ground trembled anew, a low rumble rising from the depths of the earth, as if the very heart of Ithara protested our presence. Yet, the veil pulsed with an intermittent light, catching glimmers of hope in its embrace. I wiped the dust from my face, fingers trembling as they met the fabric of my journal, the words jumbled yet yearning to be brought to life. Now, we have to go. No's command shattered my momentary reverie, a reminder of the peril lurking behind us. The courtyard's walls crumbled further, like a ship sinking beneath the waves, and the shadows of the past loomed larger. Each second felt weighty, with the prospect of becoming another forgotten whisper within Ithara's confines. "We can't linger," I echoed, urgency spurring me on as I took a step toward the veil, heart racing against the specter of ruin at our backs. "Do we even know where this leads?" Ava questioned, doubt threading through her tone, yet she too felt the magnetic pull of the shimmering light. "We must find out." I pressed on, resolve hardening in the depths of my soul. What awaits beyond? What if it is our only chance? We have to risk everything. With a swift exchange of glances, a silent understanding bloomed among us, the pact of survival binding our hearts even as the abyss sought to reclaim its treasures. And just as the stones above rumbled one final time, I pushed forward, the light ahead blurring against the mounting shadows. In that desperate moment, we surged through the archway, a chorus of dread and determination thrumming in our chests as the world collapsed behind us. The air felt different beyond the threshold, charged, electric, filled with the promise of forgotten realms waiting to be unveiled. Behind us, the crumbling sounds of a once great civilization echoed like a funeral dirge, reverberating through the darkness we left behind. I dared not look back, not as the veil enveloped us, its ethereal light swallowing the shadows whole. The final thud of collapsing masonry struck a chilling chord, yet as I stepped into the shimmering twilight, I felt the city's grip loosen its hold, and for the first time I dared to believe in rebirth beyond ruin. Chapter 17. The Ethics of Discovery. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, a relentless hum that made the stark, whitewashed room feel more like a cell than a refuge. The air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and despair, a reminder of what we had escaped, though what lay ahead remained as uncertain as the flickering shadows at the edge of my vision. At a narrow metal table, I scrawled furiously in my journal, the sketches blurring with my fraying thoughts, while the echoes of past sins haunted the periphery of my mind. Dr. Helena Martin moved briskly between cots, her sharp gray eyes piercing through the veil of fatigue that clung to the survivors like a shroud. Her clipboard was a bastion of order in the chaos, pages rustling softly as she made meticulous notes on our bandaged arms and weary expressions. I could feel the weight of her expectations, the steel resolve that pushed her forward, as though it were a shield against the encroaching dread. She stopped by a young woman, her brow furrowed with concern, and I wondered if anyone had told her that the living often bore worse scars than the dead. "Liam," she called, her tone firm and unyielding, pulling my attention back to the present, "we need your account of what transpired." The way she directed her gaze around the room was reminiscent of an academic scrutinizing a lost manuscript, searching for truth amongst fragments of fear. I felt a tremor of something between annoyance and gratitude. Her authoritative manner brooked no nonsense, and yet I was too tangled in my thoughts to respond adequately. I lifted my pencil again, sketching lines that trembled as they etched out distorted symbols from the depths of my mind. The memories rushed back, shadows whispering from the corners, the taste of fear lingering like iron in my mouth. The sketches morphed under my trembling hand, a haunting amalgamation of visions and terrors that entwined with the reality of our harrowing expedition. Ava sat across from me, engrossed in unrolling a brittle piece of ancient parchment, her striking blue eyes darting over its surface. There was a certain elegance in her concentration, a fierce independence that drove her pursuit of knowledge. Yet even now, amongst the remnants of our trials, There was an unspoken barrier between us. She thrust forward her notes with renewed vigor, challenging the shadows with her intellect. "We must reveal the city's secrets," she asserted, her voice low yet fervent. The words held a weight, a promise wrapped in ambition that pushed back against the horror that had chased us from the depths. Noah stood silently near the curtained window, his hand resting on a battered survival knife, ever watchful. The muscles in his arms were taut, shaped by a life lived with one foot in danger. I could sense his guarded nature, as though he feared the darkness beyond our temporary sanctuary would seep in through the cracks. Every flutter of movement outside seemed to draw his gaze, a flicker of tension that reminded me how far we had strayed from the safety of academic debates to this morbid purgatory. It was hard to discern which shadows he fought, the ones that haunted his past or those that now loomed at our doorstep. Dr. Martin had turned her attention to each of us, scrutinizing our body language as if it were her next archaeological find. "How do you propose we handle this discovery?" she inquired, her clipboard poised like an interrogator's pen. The question hung in the air, heavy with implication, the gravity of our recent encounter intertwining with our collective guilt. It was an invitation to unravel the chaos and lay it bare before her, a choice that would weigh upon us long after the words had been spoken. As our voices rose and fell in a discordant symphony of ideas and fears, I felt a slight tremor in my hand, the pencil scratching against the pages in erratic bursts. Each declaration sparked another, filling the sterile room with palpable anxiety. I glanced at Noah, his jaw clenched as he slammed his fist against the table. "We must destroy everything. The evidence only brings more trouble." His voice was hoarse, a testament to his silent battles, and for a moment I could see in his eyes the flickering images of everything we had unearthed. Ava shot him a look, the fierce intelligence in her gaze both challenging and offended. "We owe it to history to preserve what we've found." Her voice surged with indignation, an embattled plea against his pragmatism. I watched as her passion flared like a beacon, illuminating the darkening corners of our uncertainty, yet it only ignited further conflict, with no path forward visible amidst the fray. The air grew thicker as Dr. Martin pointed at each document and map scattered across the table, demanding clarity amidst the chaos of our thoughts. The scrape of chairs against the ground and the rustle of paper created an anxious rhythm, one that kept the darkness just beyond our reach, yet felt uncomfortably close. We were all threads in a tapestry fraying at the edges, our collective hopes, fears, and secrets echoing off the clinical walls. But as I sat there, fighting my own urge to intervene, to find some clarity in the disarray, I felt the gnawing sense of dread that came with unspooling the past, an ever-present reminder of the ancient city's secrets lurking just beyond our understanding. In that stark room, where sterile light met the soft shadows of our failings, I wondered if we were destined to become as lost as the ruins we sought to unearth. The long wooden table bore scars from countless debates, its surface worn smooth by years of discussions that had birthed both understanding and conflict. In this makeshift debriefing room, filled with the mechanical beeps of monitors and the clack of a ceiling fan, the air pulsed with unspoken tensions. As I passed a worn photograph of the artifact across the table, I felt the heavy weight of history and consequence hovering over us, a specter demanding we confront the chasm that yawned between our aspirations and the horrors we had unearthed. "This," I said, my voice low yet fervent as I slid the photo closer to Ava, "this is what we have been risking everything for." The image depicted an intricate artifact, its details blurred yet haunting, and I watched as Ava's eyes widened with excitement. Her determination crackled in the air, igniting a fervor I desperately wanted to cling to amidst the uncertainty. Ava thrust forward a stack of translated texts, her fingers trembling with a mix of adrenaline and frustration. "The city's secrets must be revealed," she declared, the fervor in her voice setting the room ablaze with her passion. As the papers rustled in her grasp, I felt the weight of her words, a proclamation filled with ambition and despair, a paradox of enlightenment and folly. Yet it was Noah, still shadowed near the door, who punctured the building excitement with his voice, a low growl of frustration. "We must destroy everything. The evidence only brings more trouble," he warned, slamming his fist against the table in a fit of suppressed rage. The wood vibrated under the impact, a jolt that sliced through our deliberations. His wide-set eyes flashed with a primal urgency, one that spoke of a survivalist instinct honed by years of navigating dangers. I could see Ava stiffen at Noah's words, a defensive barrier rising between them. "You're suggesting we erase history because of fear?" she retorted, her tone laced with disbelief. There was a ferocity to her that made the shadows tremble, and I felt caught in their crossfire, my heart heavy with the weight of our choices. But even as tempers flared and words echoed off the sterile walls, the void left by Professor Jake's absence loomed large, an unspoken reminder of the price we had paid. His empty chair seemed to fester in the corner, taunting us with the brilliance we lacked, a gravestone for the intellectual legacy he had wished to uphold. I could almost hear the remnants of his skepticism, echoing through the discontent that permeated the room. Dr. Martin watched, clipboard held firmly in one hand, the other pressed against the table, as she attempted to exert control over the chaotic discourse. "How do you propose we handle this discovery?" she asked, her voice slicing through the tension like a knife. Each syllable resonated with authority, the weight of her position palpable as we sought clarity in the turmoil. The group's collective tension was thick enough to slice, and as we began to speak over one another, I felt adrift in a sea of conflicting motivations and fears. Our voices rose and fell, a cacophony of desperation as we sought answers from the abyss. The scrape of a chair against the floor provided a percussion to our fervor, while the rustle of paper mirrored the chaos swirling around us. "Discovering the past isn't a matter of destruction," Ava said, her conviction unwavering. "It's about understanding. We owe it to those who came before us." Her insistence was filled with passion, her youthful exuberance attempting to shatter the oppressive darkness that enveloped us. Noah's brow furrowed, tension radiating from his every muscle as he spoke. "And at what cost? Those who lived in that city." His voice trailed off, swallowed by the unnameable fears that clung to his words, and I understood. We were all haunted by the specter of what lay behind us. The heated discussions faltered for a moment, each of us grasping for understanding amidst the rising stakes. Dr. Martin stood poised, her eyes darting from one document to the next, as she sought a semblance of order in the madness. "Let's focus," she said, pushing back the growing chaos with a wave of her clipboard. "We must decide, tread carefully or plunge into the depths of this mystery." Her attempts to ground us became a thin lifeline amid our turbulence, a beckoning to unite against the impending darkness of ignorance. But even as her voice sought clarity, the ghosts of our decisions haunted the room, the weight of our choices casting long shadows across the scars etched in the table, a reminder that every discovery came with its own form of sacrifice. In that claustrophobic space, we stood at the precipice of enlightenment and madness, clinging to the fragments of our understanding while staring into the depths of the unknown, where knowledge and terror entwined. The cramped tent swallowed us whole, a fabric cocoon in which whispers became echoes and shadows danced nervously in the flickering light of the oil lamp. The musty air wrapped around my senses like a thick fog, reminding me of the decay and secrets we had unearthed in the depths. Cross-legged on the threadbare rug, I scribbled in my journal, the pencil scratching against the paper, as if I were drawing the very essence of despair that clung to each breath we took in that suffocating enclosure. My hand moved quickly, trying to capture the symbols that had imprinted themselves onto my mind, the distorted shapes and intricate lines that seemed to writhe beneath my skin. The feverish pace of my pencil mirrored the chaos within me. Images of shadowed figures and choked whispers flashed like strobe lights against the darkness. Each stroke carried an intensity born from fear, a need to process the raw edges of a reality that now felt increasingly surreal. It was then that I heard her. Ava's soft voice drifted to me, a haunting melody amidst the solitude as she approached the entrance. She was murmuring phrases in a forgotten tongue, her tone a blend of reverence and obsession, and I paused in my frenetic scribbling to absorb the calm in her cadence. It tethered me momentarily to a world where words had power, each syllable a potential key to unlock the city's secrets, if only we dared to tread further into the abyss. Outside, I could hear Noah's shallow, rapid breathing, the faint sound of his pacing echoing like a heartbeat drumming against the fabric walls. He remained a shadow, guarding against the unseen horrors that slumbered in the dark. His presence was magnetic and alarming, an unsteady protector wrestling with ghosts of his own, a collision of instincts born from years navigating the wild, steeped in both fear and knowledge. I returned to my drawings, the pencil scratching as the symbols bled into one another, creating a tapestry of confusion and urgency. A flash of anger sparked within me. The inability to disentangle reality from nightmare felt suffocating, a paralysis ignited by the tension outside our fragile sanctuary. Each iteration of the mark one created took on new meanings. What was once merely an artifact now felt like an anchor, pulling us towards a darkness I could barely grasp. Then, the weight of a pause settled heavily upon the scene. I glanced up, just in time to see Ava and Noah silhouetted against the dim light of the tent entrance, their expressions stark as they stood silently at the threshold. The moment suspended between us was taut with unspoken fear, and as they shared that glimpse of each other, I could feel a delicate balance of understanding lingering in the air. This was a fragile connection forged in fire, a testament to the chaos we had unleashed and the trials we had faced. The flickering oil lamp cast distorted shadows across their faces, amplifying their shared burdens and fears. It spoke volumes in that muted moment, an acknowledgement of the scars we would carry forward from this place, even as we clung to each other against the rising tide of despair. And in that stillness, I recognized the impending uncertainty, how close we had come to the edge, how much further we could yet fall. With a slow breath, I laid my pencil aside, the symbols pooling around me like an unguarded truth. No longer just marks on paper, they were confessions, reverberating through my soul as I faced the echoes of our choices, the shadows of the past that seemed to draw near with every passing second. We were each encased in our own shells, haunted by what we had witnessed and terrified of what would come next. Yet there was a bond between us, a tenuous thread woven through trauma and revelation that offered a flicker of hope amid the encroaching darkness. The air inside the tent felt heavy, laden with all we had seen and all that remained unspoken, binding us together in an intricate dance between past and present, knowledge and fear.